An important thing I want us to understand is the Treaty of Verona. The Treaty of Verona. Understand the Treaty of Verona. That's what I want us to be at least familiar with. We at least got to be familiar, know the term, and know what it's about. This is an American Diplomatic Code, 1778 to 1884. Still in effect, of course. This is when it was gaining formation as a unified infrastructure through even the United Nations later on. However, this was mentioned in Congressional Records 1916. In 1916, by Senator Owen. Understand? And I quote, Senator Owen said regarding this, I wish to put in the record the secret Treaty of Verona of November 22nd, 1822, showing that this ancient conflict is between the rule of the few and the rule of the many. I wish to call the attention of the Senate to this treaty because it is the threat of this treaty which was the basis of the Monroe Doctrine. It throws a powerful white light upon the conflict between monarchical government and government by the people. The Holy Alliance under the influence of Metternich and Premier of Austria in 1822 issued this remarkable secret document, the Secret Treaty of Verona, and in just a few minutes you'll get to look at those details. Now, this is the basis right here in which, as I read, it's a huddling up of the nations, the monarchical nations, those nations that are run on a system of monarchy, in opposition to those governments of the people, which we know is a republic. And within republics, there is expression of liberalism as well as democracies. The revolution, it comes from the expression of liberalism and democracy within the republic. Okay, let's get that understood. That is where revolution comes from. There is an illuminated side to liberalism. Liberalism is an expression of Libra. There is shadow and illumination to every energy and frequency. Okay, let's keep that in mind. Now, the point is that this came about after Napoleon Bonaparte revealed to the European nations that you could lose your nation from the faith of the heart of the people or from the liberal democratic expressions of the people, which today they call it communism. Okay, today they have coined it as communism among many other expressions. Okay, and the idea is to get all of these nations on the same page to work together to suppress this possibility, this threat that lingers over their heads. And this goes down to even media, Pope bulls, or Pope policies, involvement with the Pope to influence the people. It has to do with getting on code collectively, working together to, in a united fashion, strengthen and reinforce the expression of patriarchal rule. The whole idea is to undermine every republic, undermine the republics, and continue to push and insist on your monarchy, continue to insist on your oligarchy, who pretends to be congressmen and congresswomen under the guise, keep lying to the people, fooling the people, tricking the people. Meanwhile, you are expressing the same monarchy that you have been surviving with for centuries. And the people get poorer and they get richer. But they can't have any rebellions, especially not like what took place in France or Haiti. Why do you think Haiti looks the way it does today? Because they lost the revolution against African slaves or Moors. Some of them were Moors. Napoleon Bonaparte got up out of there. And France is charging them with the debt of getting their ass whooped. Now, ain't that something? And it stripped the nation. It stripped the nation. So anyway, this was when they was trying to get it together globally as the Spanish Inquisition was spreading through the doctrine of discovery and the manifest destiny. It was piracy, domination, violence, acts of cruelty, crimes against humanity to get all of this established. It was nothing sweet. It was nothing nice. It was nothing innocent. Tell the truth. So anyway, this carries relevance so that we can understand not to fall for fancy language. Not to fall for fancy language. I want to give you a look at Article 2 first. Just jump right into that of Secret Treaty of Verona. And I quote, "As it cannot be doubted that the liberty of the press is the most powerful means used by the pretended supporters of the rights of nations to the detriment of those of princes, the high contracting parties promise reciprocally to adopt all proper measures to suppress it, not only in their own state, but also in the rest of Europe." Article 3, convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, the high contracting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states those measures which clergy may adopt, with the aim of ameliorating their own interests intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the prince, and the contracting powers join in offering their ranks to the Pope for what he has already done for them and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. 5013C, Skull and Bones 322. Write that down. 5013C, Skull and Bones 322. This is where that comes from. To buy out the churches, to suppress truth and real spiritual wisdom and teaching and gnosis, to make sure that the hearts cannot be illuminated through proper teaching or knowledge or truth. Understand that, because once the heart is illuminated, the revolutionary awakens in the being. You know what I mean? But anyway, let's go. You heard? Like, share, subscribe. Show your support. Thank you for being here. Let's learn. Let's learn. You heard? Let's put things into perspective about what are the origins of the things that we're seeing politically and socially in our world today. Let me start by saying, in the early 1800s, when Napoleon was going about the world whooping ass and taking names, following his defeat in the War of the Sixth Coalition, there was a holy alliance, what's called a holy alliance, formed 1815 by France, the Austrian Empire, and Great Britain was also included in that. That brought in also Russia. Now, Napoleon, who was called Little Muhammad, yeah, chew on that. He was called Little Muhammad. He preferred to be called Little Muhammad. You heard it right, Muhammad. One who admired Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a person who studied Rahiq al-Maktoum, Prophet Muhammad, a person who patterned his ways and strategies after Prophet Muhammad. Napoleon, understand that. He symbolized a threat to the monarchical nations, those nations that were led by monarchy. That threat was that he symbolized the potential of the people to challenge monarchies. And they couldn't have that. Especially ideals of the people putting strength, resilience, and courage behind their desire to be their own source of representation and infrastructure over their society as a republic for the people, by the people. The monarchies were very much opposed to that.
After the French Revolution erupted in 1789, Europe was thrown into chaos. Neighboring countries' monarchs feared they would share the fate of Louis XVI and attacked the new republic, while at home, extremism and mistrust between factions led to bloodshed. In the midst of all this conflict, a powerful figure emerged to take charge of France. But did he save the revolution or destroy it?
Order, order. Who's the defendant today? I don't see anyone.
Your Honor, this is Napoleon Bonaparte, the tyrant who invaded nearly all of Europe to compensate for his personal, stature-based insecurities. Actually, Napoleon was at least average height for his time. The idea that he was short comes only from British wartime propaganda. And he was no tyrant. He was safeguarding the young republic from being crushed by the European monarchies, by overthrowing its government and seizing power himself. Your Honor, as a young and successful military officer, Napoleon fully supported the French Revolution and its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. But the revolutionaries were incapable of real leadership. Robespierre and the Jacobins who first came to power unleashed a reign of terror on the population, with their anti-Catholic extremism and non-stop executions of everyone who disagreed with them. And the directory that replaced them was an unstable and incompetent oligarchy. They needed a strong leader who could govern wisely and justly.
So, France went through that whole revolution just to end up with another all-powerful ruler?
Not quite. Napoleon's new powers were derived from the Constitution that was approved by a popular vote in the consulate. Ha! The Constitution was practically dictated at gunpoint in a military coup, and the public only accepted the tyrant because they were tired of constant civil war. Be that as it may, Napoleon introduced a new constitution and a legal code that kept some of the most important achievements of the revolution intact: freedom of religion, abolition of hereditary privilege, and equality before the law for all men. All men, indeed. He deprived women of the rights that the revolution had given them and even reinstated slavery in the French colonies. Haiti is still recovering from the consequences centuries later. What kind of equality is that? The only kind that could be stably maintained at the time, and still far ahead of France's neighbors.
Speaking of neighbors, what was with all the invasions?
Great question, Your Honor. Which invasions are we talking about? It was the neighboring empires who had invaded France, trying to restore the monarchy and prevent the spread of liberty across Europe. Twice by the time Napoleon took charge. Having defended France as a soldier and a general in those wars, he knew that the best defense is a good offense. An offense against the entire continent? Peace was secured by 1802, and other European powers recognized the new French regime. But Bonaparte couldn't rest unless he had control of the whole continent, and all he knew was fighting. He tried to enforce a European-wide blockade of Britain, invaded any country that didn't comply, and launched more wars to hold on to his gains. And what was the result? Millions dead all over the continent, and the whole international order shattered. You forgot the other result, the spread of democratic and liberal ideals across Europe. It was thanks to Napoleon that the continent was reshaped from a chaotic patchwork of fragmented feudal and religious territories into efficient, modern, and secular nation-states where the people held more power and rights than ever before. Should we also thank him for the rise of nationalism and the massive increase in army sizes? You can see how well that turned out a century later.
So what would European history have been like if it weren't for Napoleon?
Unimaginably better. Napoleon's seemingly unstoppable momentum would die in the Russian winter snows, along with most of his army. But even after being deposed and exiled, he refused to give up, escaping from his prison and launching a bold attempt at restoring his empire before being defeated for the second and final time. Bonaparte was a ruler full of contradictions, defending a popular revolution by imposing absolute dictatorship and spreading liberal ideals through imperial wars. And though he never achieved his dream of conquering Europe, he undoubtedly left his mark on it, for better or for worse.
So it's an idea of my threat is your threat. What threatens me threatens you, so we should come together on the same ideal. This ideal was for the preservation of monarchical rulership and dictatorship while suppressing the formation or exercise of republics. And we know that republics can also include alternative expressions that we understand as liberalism and democracies. And there's a temptation for many to interpret such things along the line of communism in some ways, which explains the Vatican and its role in espionage, surveillance, and keeping watch throughout the infrastructures of societies under the leverage of unum sanctum, I hope you've been following that. So by this time, the monarchies assumed extension through those conquistadors that they have financed to go and explore and spread the Spanish Inquisition through the doctrine of discovery and the manifest destiny, which was to expand the Spanish Inquisition and unum sanctum over the Western world. By that time, the Americas would buy into such ideals. In buying into such ideals, it also gave rise to
Professor Charlie Evans here with a few words about the Holy Alliance of 1815, which is the subject of your essay question for the History 241 midterm exam. And you see the terms of the question right there. You see other parts of the exam above, but I'm going to focus a little bit about the Holy Alliance itself. Doing a little bit of quick research on Wikipedia, I wanted to show you images of the key figures who were the signatories of the Holy Alliance. And of course, probably the chief motivator was Tsar Alexander I of Russia. And here we have a picture of him in his full military costume. We have Emperor Francis II of Austria in his regal coronation robes. And then we have King Frederick Wilhelm III of Prussia, who was the third of the main signatories of the Holy Alliance. And you'll notice that all three of them were epitomes of monarchical power in the early 19th century. The Holy Alliance itself had its origins after the Congress of Vienna, or actually during the Congress of Vienna, and I have here the picture that I found of the final act of the Congress of Vienna. And the Congress of Vienna, which lasted from late 1814 into the summer of 1815, it was held in Vienna, of course. And the purpose of the Congress was to basically redraw the map of Europe after the Napoleonic Wars. Russia had been in a constant state of unrest since the French Revolution of 1789. There had really been one war or another in one area or another of Europe since 1792, and so from 1792 to 1815, it's 23 years of war that happened in Europe. Boundaries were redrawn, countries disappeared, and so the Congress of Vienna brought together the key diplomats of Europe in an effort to redraw the map of Europe in an effort to put back together the pieces of Europe that had been destroyed by the Revolutionary era. In many ways, the key figure at the Congress of Vienna, and actually as the key manipulator of the Holy Alliance after it was signed, was Prince Clemens von Metternich. He was originally the foreign minister of the Austrian Empire. Later, he became the chancellor, or roughly equivalent to the prime minister of the Austrian Empire, and he became the really most influential person in manipulating the Holy Alliance to support the intentions of Austria, Russia, and Prussia. One of the key aspects of the final act of the Congress of Vienna was to put in writing the territorial gains that accrued to Prussia, Austria, and Russia after the Napoleonic Wars. Prussia gained substantial territory along the Baltic Ocean and in the western parts of Germany. Austria gained largely the territory of northern Italy, came under Austrian control, and Russia gained most of Poland, and Poland was brought into the Russian Empire as a result of the Congress of Vienna And so the Congress of Vienna created a new territorial settlement for Europe. It validated the powers of the conservative regimes in Austria, Prussia, and Russia. And then the Holy Alliance itself was this kind of mystical envisionment of Alexander I, who believed that this kind of bonds of Christianity would go on to solidify these bonds of the conservative powers. But that's for something for you to write about in your essay. And so it's a pretty straightforward essay. The document itself is pretty small for you to analyze. You do a little bit of research with what's in the textbook and what you can find on the web. And in addition to my quick comments here, you'll do fine with the essay. Okay, good luck.
Now, before we go any further, this is an edited insert of some details that I'm putting in here. So I want you to be patient with me as I'm trying to pull together a very big picture. And I'm doing my best to make it seamless and smooth to, download or retain. Understand? I know, you all have the mind to do so, but I'm challenging myself in articulating all of these details together so that it is seamless. Now, before we go further, I want to home in on the Holy Alliance as a sub-expression of the Congress of Vienna. That's important. And the reason is because it's the origin of conservatism. It is the origin of conservatism. It's appropriate for the context today because the things that I'm going to explain concerning the secret treaty of Verona has everything to do with why the Republican, Democratic, conservative, or liberal cultural polarizations in our society are continuing in the energy that it does. And I'm trying to show that in origin, this is not new. It just takes different forms and expressions today. So we want to look at what was the basis and origin of conservatism. Conservatism in and of itself, as you're about to see through the details that we're going to go over, is about resisting liberal, democratic, revolutionary ideals, keeping things the same within the controls of Ahrimanic infrastructures, which is the Shadow 8 governance, Capricorn governance, rigid, patriarchal governance. And its guise is always Christianity. Christianity is the guise of conservatism. It proposes as upholding a republic through the Constitution. However, not so. What it's really about in essence is oligarchical, rich, filthy rich principalities through names that hold weight and leverage as monarchs. In the West, these monarchs, powerful, rich people that form a deep state behind what we foolishly believe is a government representation, and all of them, of course, answering to the unum sanctum papal order of France and the Vatican. Now, France is key in this because France, the revolutions in France demonstrated the potential of the people's power in revolution if they channel their energy through liberal or democratic expressions that wish to step outside, okay, the outer ring of Saturn, Uranus, Aquarius, step outside Pluto, the infrastructures that constrain, limit, or step upon their natural and inalienable rights, not as fictitious characters, but as natural persons, true and living beings. It is the monarchical or the monarchy that wishes to keep everyone in a conservative state, justified through regurgitation of constitutional ideals, while they practice hypocrisy in those things, saying one thing and doing the other. And it's a white superiority complex as well that goes with Christian nationalism consistently. And it wishes to suppress other nations, nationalities, religions, in order to discourage and suppress the potential of upheavals and revolutions such as what they saw with Napoleon Bonaparte. So the basis is that Napoleon Bonaparte showed them that they have reason to be concerned with the power of the people, because Napoleon Bonaparte gave them a glimpse, a scary glimpse of the power of the people and the influence that one person can have with the people. That's what they don't want. And why is it necessary to talk about this? We've come full circle. The revolutionary codes of the late 1700s, it happened here in these United States. It also happened in the United States of France. It happened in Haiti when the Haitian slaves rebelled against Napoleon Bonaparte, sending his ass out to these northern states, selling the entire Louisiana Purchase. He was terrified and shook at what he seen of the power of voodoo. So it's the European Holy Alliance taking claim of Christian conservative ideals used to leverage power and control of the people through Constantinian Roman Catholicism, and the claim, as you will hear in what I'm about to show you, is that it's to restore balance or to maintain balance. I beg to differ. It's not about balance. It's about them having total and complete control, which is patriarchy, not matriarchy. Going against all those who are for matriarchy, which is all indigenous people of the earth are matriarchal, not patriarchal. They are the only people of the earth who are patriarchal and not matriarchal. The only people. And they came together in an alliance to preserve their monarchy and to suppress liberalism and democracy. Now, you hear me all the time speak against liberal ideals. When we look with two eyes, we know that liberal ideals comes from Libra. And if we understand astrology or the origin of consciousness, energies, cosmic algorithms of spirit, we know that every sign has a shadow and it has illumination. It has a negative and a positive. It has a good and a bad. It has loss and opportunity. So when we look at the positive aspects of liberalism, which is Libra, it expands the wings of Ma'at over every city which is justice, equality, love, truth, freedom. It's human rights. It's human rights. And that's what liberalism homes in on when it is done in truth and not in selfish perversions, such as what we've seen happening in this country as of lately since the Obama era. Liberalism is where the rebellion raises from. It's where the system gets challenged from. It's where overthrowing and coup d'etat takes place. It is from the liberal mindset. It is from the liberal energy. But when you mix things like feminism, gender issues of who should have a penis and who should have a vagina, and all of these other corrupt things, when you add racism into it and all this other stuff, you're no longer in what liberalism is for as a benefit for the people. You're in perversions now because you're projecting toxic fears and ignorance instead of being a revolutionary for a revelation. There's a huge difference in that. The indoctrination of liberalism through college campuses is very dangerous. Very dangerous. So when it comes to truth and justice, equality, rights of the people, the inalienable rights, that's what they don't want. They don't want it people who catch that fever again. And here comes the revolution. So this holy alliance is all about suppressing the possibility of revolutions. And as you know, Pluto was in Aquarius, was transiting Aquarius when we had these revolutions back in the 1700s. Where is Pluto now? Pluto was getting back in position to do the same thing, which is why it's important to understand these things that I'm going over, because as it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end, is what I want you to understand. Where does it come from?
Europe. Now, first of all, let's go ahead and get this year in our mind. 1815. Very important year. This is the year of Napoleon's surrender. This is the year that is the midpoint of the AP European History course, if you're taking that, and really a landmark in European history because it ends a quarter century of continual warfare in Europe. It ends the chaos that came after the French Revolution. And after Napoleon's surrender, European leaders got together in Vienna, Austria, and the objective here is to restore order in Europe, to try to build a framework of stability and peace.
Now, with no discredit to this very intelligent man who's explaining these details in a wonderful way, I want us to think about the words that he's using, not in a way to discredit the value of what he's teaching, but to expand the mind in a Gemini-Uranus sense to catch the message that's not being spoken, which is not from his intent, but from the ethereal. Can you, of your own critical thinking mind, understand that it is not about balance, it's about total control and domination? Okay, I can't emphasize that enough. It has to be total control and domination. It is greed and it is lust for power, these monarchs. And it's still the same today with the rich lobbyists, oligarchs, and investors behind them. And they're very powerful names, and the illusion of Christian nationalism in front of them, beguiling the people, pretending to be for the Constitution as Republicans, but really are Constantinian Roman policyholders with the same intentions in the past as it was in the past today. Let's understand. Let's keep focused, and let's use our full conscience as we listen. Understand.
And undo the French Revolution to the extent that it is possible. Now, of course, you can't totally turn back the clock, but you can try to do it the best you can. For example, a lot of you watching this are underage, have probably never opened a bottle of wine before, but once you take the cork out, well, you can try to put the cork back in, and you can sort of get it in, but you can't quite get it in like it was earlier. But you can try. So keep in mind, the Congress of Vienna is really about trying to put that cork in and trying to get that as much like the old way as possible, and to restore the balance of power that had been sort of eluding Europe ever since Louis XIV, really, that France, for over 100 years, had really been threatening the balance of power. And the parties at the Congress of Vienna are the members of the Quadruple Alliance. This is the alliance that defeated Napoleon, alliance of Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Britain. Now, keep in mind that the objective here is not to punish France. We're not trying to exact reparations. We're not trying to reduce them to nothing. We're just trying to make sure that they can't threaten the balance of power.
Now, again, it's not the balance of power. It's about maintaining total power and control over, quote unquote, the people. Discouraging and suppressing the people's power to resist oppression and injustice. As it was a beginning, so it is in the ending. Understand. Listen with your heart and your head.
Balance of power. And because of that, France is actually going to be included in the peace talks. Depending on what test you're studying for, you may have to know about a guy named Talleyrand, who was the French emissary to the Congress of Vienna, ended up being pretty influential. And it's rare that the defeated party gets a seat at the table. Certainly wasn't the case 100 years later at Versailles. But the great powers concluded that in order to reestablish the balance of power, in order to create a stable and prosperous and peaceful Europe, France must remain a great power. And this will reestablish the balance of power and hopefully create peace in Europe. Keep in mind, the balance of power is a key theme in European history. This is something that over and over again Europeans are trying to create, a system where no power predominates and nobody is strong enough to take over any of the others. And the dominant figure at the Congress of Vienna is Clemens von Metternich. He was the Austrian foreign minister. Now, keep in mind that the age following this Congress of Vienna is called the Age of Metternich sometimes, this period from 1815 to 1848. Metternich is a very influential figure. What you're going to do if you're preparing for an exam, you're going to take your Congress of Vienna box and you're going to put Metternich in there, you're going to put conservatism in there, and all of that good stuff. Metternich was known as the coachman of Europe, the guy that is driving this team, okay? If you think about a horse-drawn carriage and the guy is making those horses go. You can kind of think of him also as the coach of the team if you want to think about him in more modern terms. And Metternich is a champion of conservatism, which is a philosophy that becomes dominant in the wake of the turmoil of the French Revolution. And keep in mind, throw out like conservatism as you think of it in America today. This is something that...
Now, I beg to differ. It's no different than conservatism in America today. It's just that language is a peculiar institution. Language is a peculiar institution. I sound like Dr. Umar Johnson, repeat myself 3 times. It's just that language is a peculiar institution. That is the point. Anything can be hidden behind particular choice words. Quote unquote, maintain stability. Stability to them is for their pocket watching to be stable. It's for their eggs in a basket to be stable. It's for what they got going on not to be interrupted or disrupted. Do you see stability being manifest and created by the powers of conservative leadership? No, you don't. You heard a bunch of promises, and then you see them serving their own rich oligarchs, lobbyists in Israel. Stability is simply control to them. Domination, patriarchal control. Stepping on the matriarchal inalienable rights of the people. You're homeless, we're going to criminalize you for being homeless. You're on drugs, we're going to criminalize you for having drug addictions. We don't care about why you're homeless. We don't care about why so many of you have drug addictions. We don't care about why the youth are running the streets in so much violence. We don't care about any of that. We're just going to get rid of you. Patriarchal, Ahrimanic, no heart, no soul, no compassion, no love, no conscience. Just business. Just business. This is all about power and control. Ahriman. The Ahriman, the Ahriman. Principalities in high places.
Something that has some stuff in common, but really is kind of different, okay? But really, conservatism is about two things: stability within states and stability between states, okay? France became unstable within itself, and it resulted in chaos between states as well. So conservatism seeks to create order, and whether it's within states or between states. And the objective here, of course, is that the French Revolution never happen again. Anywhere. So first, let's talk about stability within states. All right, now conservatives in the 19th century, they believed in tradition, okay, whereas the French Revolution was about liberal reform that turned into a radical mess.
Now let me ask you this. How can it be a liberal mess? How can it be a radical mess if the people were actually fighting for something? How can it be a radical mess if the people had something to fight for? If the people are resisting oppression, resisting injustice, resisting tyranny, that is not radical. That is not radical liberalism. It's defending your humanity. It's self-preservation. It is an act of love manifest through justice and your anger even. It is revolutionaries coming to rise to make sure that we have justice tomorrow. It is a breaking free from the inner rings of Saturn into the outer rings of Saturn. It is the power of Uranus and Aquarius, Pluto lending power to the people, as that is where Pluto was at in Aquarius when this was happening. So these interpretations, yes, the textbook was written this way to control the people, but the truth is in the heart. If we're not in touch with the heart, we will never connect with the truth. We will just hear what people tell us, let them feed it to us, and we accept it as being true. You have to awaken the heart. And when you listen, listen with your heart, not just your mind. Because the heart knows what truth is. The revolutions were not events where the people were doing wrong and evil and just wanted to be tyrannical. No, they refused to keep taking the punishment. The same with the revolution in Haiti. Were they wrong because they fought back as slaves?
Yes. Tradition is what keeps things stable. And the way that tradition is maintained is through institutions, whether they be religious institutions or the nobility. Keep in mind that the French Revolution at first was about liberal reform, getting rid of the privileges of the church and the nobility, and then just like taking a card out of a house of cards or something like that, or if you're playing Jenga or a game like that, everything's going to fall down if you start assaulting these institutions. And conservatives in the 19th century valued the aristocracy. They believed that the aristocracy had a place in ensuring stability. They were not champions of liberal reform because they believed that this liberal reform that happened in France in the early years of the French Revolution caused the stuff that came afterwards. They don't believe in popular government because the French Revolution, it all started with, hey, let's have an election for our assembly and let's let every man vote regardless of whether he owns property. That ended up not being such a good idea. And of course, conservatives are not fans of nationalism because nationalism threatens existing borders, existing political entities when people start talking about, well, you know what, a nation is really more about language and shared culture than it is about who's governing us. That's dangerous, okay? That creates upheavals.
Now, as you take notice of the borders that was just shown, one of the threats was a rising tide of nationalism. Now, the expansion of Cancer through Jupiter is bringing back that same theme of nationalism being a very sensitive and explosive topic. Expansion of the experience of pride and nationalism, or fighting for justice and righteous anger through nationalism. Now, there is the possibility of many nationalities coexisting together when there is fairness, when there's justice, when there's less fear. Okay? So when people have a spirit of fear or spirit of lack, the spirit of fear and the spirit of lack, it awakens hostility and competition that is fear-based. And there goes the danger right there. The danger is not in other people taking pride in their nationalities and their language and their culture. I beg to differ. But when scarcity is being pressed on the people and lack of jobs, lack of resources, lack of money, lack of options, lack of humanity for every person, fairness, equality, justice. These are the things that makes that dangerous. And who's responsible for that? The leadership of the state. So if these monarchs were not into practicing such tyranny out of their own greed, they wouldn't have reason to fear that. Because newsflash, the Moroccan Empire, the Moorish Empire, operated on this wise, where there are many nationalities across many continents that were included in the Moorish Empire, not just people who look like me.
Now moving on to stability between states. Now, the way this works is through a system that Metternich came up with known as the Concert of Europe. Now, this isn't like a concert that I go to or something like that. Yeah, rock! Ah, cha, 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 cha. That sort. No. Okay, this like the sort of concert that I've never been to in my life. The one where the conductor's like, woo, you're doing this thing like, I don't know how he, that sort of thing. If you've never conducted before, which is most of you probably think I know what I'm doing. If you have, you probably think this guy's a musical idiot, which I am. But the Concert of Europe, think about a symphony or something with a conductor, and everybody's playing their notes when they're supposed to play. So this is a classy type of concert, acting in concert, that the European powers should act together to ensure stability and to maintain existing national boundaries and prevent revolution. The concert system was the first example in Europe of collective security, where nations rely on each other to keep peace. Now, this was
Okay, so the expression is to keep peace, quote unquote, but keeping peace at the expense of others' security and rights. Keeping peace at the expense of others' security and rights. You can have a mission of, matter of fact, it was Donald Trump who just got done bombing Iran, and then comes out his mouth, peace. They charge it to the idea of to keep peace, to maintain peace, to promote peace. Language is a peculiar institution, and through language, the politician has a forked tongue, saying one thing meaning two other things. No word that a politician speaks ever means what they utter, not in the diction of that word. Peace is a code word. When someone says to keep peace, it means that I get the positive result of the action of oppression. I get the gain of the action of abuse or violence or tyranny. That's peace. So, let's get to a place where we can be honest enough, transparent enough with ourselves and our ears and our heart to decode the mysteries in these riddles. You know and I know it's not about collective peace. The UN is the expression of unum sanctum, which incorporates all nations. And all nations incorporate all persons, quote unquote, legal term, persons, fictitious character. That is what keeps them centralized as well as banks and as policies in sync, expressing the secret treaty of Verona, as I'm going to get farther into, and the doctrine of discovery as well as unum sanctum. They're kept on the same page through that. And this began with the Spanish Inquisition.
This was an informal arrangement. The Concert of Europe was not a formal association of nations, but it laid the groundwork for things that are going to come later, such as the League of Nations, NATO, the UN, the EU. 3 of those of which are still in existence today. So keep in mind that the concert system sets a precedent for all these formal associations that'll follow later. Another association that came out of the Congress of Vienna wasn't nearly as important, but could be on a test or something like that. This is the Holy Alliance that lasted for about 10 years. This was an agreement between Russia, Prussia, and Austria, these 3 absolutist powers of Central and Eastern Europe, and they agreed to rule in a spirit of Christian charity and assist each other in times of trouble. Now, what that really means is whenever there's a revolutionary movement or something like that in any of those countries, that the rest of them will band together and help them to crush it, okay? So it sounds really Christian, but really it's about maintaining power and that sort of thing. So don't be fooled, but, this doesn't last that long, partly because Britain says, no, we don't really want to get in that close an association with Prussia and Austria and Russia, these absolutist powers. Now let's take a look at what I'm going to call the new old map of Europe. Keep in mind that this map is being drawn according to conservative principles. This is being drawn to try to remake the boundaries of pre-Napoleonic Europe, but at the same time there's some newness to it because it has to take into account the new realities that are present. So I'm going to talk about what has changed, what has stayed the same. Now, for France, they could totally post their map on Instagram, something like that, and like just TBT, all right, just a throwback Thursday because France is throwing back to 1792. By the way, this goes out to everyone following me on Instagram as a result of these videos. Love your comments and all that kind of stuff. It's great. So France is going to be thrown back to 1792, not too far back. Almost like when people post a picture of last week or something like that and they say, woo, TBT, and it's like, hey, that was last week, okay? We're talking like baby pictures and stuff. But anyway, no war reparations, and the Bourbons are going to be restored. Louis the 18th, the guy that was going to be the 17th had died, something like that. So they wanted to give props to him or whatever. So the Bourbons are restored and France is going to be kind of recreated in its old image. Now, Russia gained some territory in Poland. Remember, this had previously been partitioned between Austria, Prussia, and Russia had been instrumental in Napoleon's defeat. Keep in mind, Napoleon brought his grand army into Russia with 500,000 people, came back with about 10,000. So Russia needs to be rewarded. Alexander I of Russia was very influential at this conference, and keep in mind the defeat of Napoleon in Russia is glorified in novels such as War and Peace. So Russia gains that territory. Now, in the former Holy Roman Empire, which had been dissolved by Napoleon, by that time, as Voltaire said, it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. And it's not going to be recreated, but something like it, similar to it, is going to be created. This is called the German Confederation, which was an association of German states to replace this defunct Holy Roman Empire. This was to be an association of 39 different German-speaking states. Now, you may think that's a lot, but keep in mind that there used to be over 300 different principalities and states that were part of the old Holy Roman Empire, some of them no larger than a city or even a town. So this is going to be modernized. Now, the big question that is going to be present for the rest of the 19th century is who will dominate this German Confederation. Will it be Austria or will it be Prussia? And at the beginning of the 19th century, it seems that Austria is going to be the dominant power, but as the 19th century drags on, Prussia becomes more and more ascendant until finally the Prussians and the Austrians fight a brief war, and Prussia is established as the preeminent German power. I'll talk about that in another lecture later on. So keep in mind, this begins the age of Metternich, about a generation where there is pretty much almost uninterrupted peace in Europe, so for 33 years. Now keep in mind, it's 99 years until there is going to be another major European war, in the sense that the whole continent's going to be involved. So almost a century of peace. Although there are going to be some wars here and there, it's going to be almost a century before the next really epic conflict. Now compare that to only 20 years between the signing of the Versailles Treaty, which ended World War I, and the beginning of World War II with Hitler's invasion of Poland. So when you compare 99 years to 20 years, you can say that compared to the Versailles Conference in the next century, the Congress of Vienna was a great success. High five. So that brings us to the conclusion of this.
So, I hope that this was helpful in bringing together details about the Holy Alliance and the Congress of Vienna, okay, which sets the precedence for conservatism as well as being under the guise of Christian, conservative, or even Republican ideals in order to suppress and control any possibilities of revolution with the people. And as I go through this discourse, hopefully I can tie together seamlessly what would make this all make sense. All right. It has everything to do with where we're at right now. So, drink your coffee, do your push-ups, drink some water, I don't know, whatever. But stay focused with me, you heard? Yeah. Now, I'm going to turn your attention to the fact that Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul, I believe Pope John Paul II, they worked together in what was called a holy alliance, okay? Similar to what you just heard, a holy alliance. It was referred to as a holy alliance. They worked together, and Pope John Paul, who worked with Ronald Reagan, was the first Polish pope who broke the chain of Italian popes for over what I believe was 50 years. And what's significant about this is that it challenged communism. That was the objective. Ronald Reagan needed help to challenge what they called or what they described as communism. Okay? So remember that language is a peculiar institution. If I say to someone who has an opinion or an expression, oh, you're being anti-Semitic, you could get canceled, blocked, lose your money, lose your job, all kinds of problems. If someone says, oh, that guy's being misogynistic, okay, all of a sudden you're written off from society. Nobody even asks questions. So words, it carries a punch. Every word is loaded. It's preloaded with sentiment. So when you use words like communism after going to grade school, they brainwash you and drill it into your head. Oh, communism is bad. Russians are bad. Hitler was bad. Gaddafi is bad. So on and so forth. But then when you grow up, when you develop your mind enough to investigate these things for yourself, you question what you were taught. And you realize that a lot of the things that took place in grade school was simply conditioning, brainwashing. So was it communism that they was fighting? Was it communism that they were challenging? That is arguable. Just because they called it that don't mean it was that. Because there is political strategy in calling things, naming things, classifying things as something that could get you canceled. And in this modern time, we see how that's the case. The names and titles that people get called for doing something that somebody else doesn't like, and the effects and consequences that goes with those accusations. To be called a communist, or to title a behavior or a cultural or political movement in a particular geographical location as communism, it conjures the Holy Alliance of Europe and the UN. It conjures the Holy Alliance of all those who have the same monarchical interests, the oligarchical interests that you just got done listening to. Everyone who's invested in the secret treaty of Verona, all of these European nations, it's a threat to that. Why? Because the human nature is matriarchal. And matriarchal human nature is close to what they call communism. It expresses itself in a likeness of what they call communism. This is what we got to understand, is to have our own mind. And when he calls on the Pope, remember, since the 1500s, Vatican has been key to espionage, intel, and pushing agendas through literature, public policy, and winning the sentiments of the hearts of the people, putting everyone on the same page, because everybody's there to worship the Pope. while they're lying to themselves and saying they're there to worship God or Jesus or to devote themselves to their religion. No, they're there to worship the Pope, rather they admit it or not. Anything that the Pope says goes. Oh, the Pope, he's holy. He's blessed by God. Oh, he's holy and sanctified. No, none is good save the Father. That's what Jesus said. None is good save the Father, including the motherfucking Pope, nigga. Fuck out of here with that shit. We got to take back our minds. Take it back. The Holy Alliance, it refers to, in fact, 1566, they formed, an organization to combat communism, spies, okay? Any type of clues or energies or expressions that gave hint to revolution or rebellion. And this is why control of knowledge and information, textbooks, so on and so forth, was so important. The Vatican is full of books and literature that gives true knowledge, true spiritual teachings, true empowerment, true social science and wisdom of all kinds that will blow your mind. It's there, but that's too powerful for the people. We can't have the people becoming awakened. So anything that will awaken them, keep it locked up in the Vatican.
We heard about his faith and spirituality, but he also played a major role in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. Earlier this week, we spoke with the author of a book on John Paul II's place in history. Joining us now is Paul Kengor, professor at Grove City College and author of A Pope and a President, John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and the extraordinary untold story of the 20th century. Paul, welcome back. Always great to see you. John Paul II was elected Pope in 1978, as you know, of course. And not only was he from Poland, but he was also the first non-Italian Pope in more than 450 years. Can you talk about the significance of that, Paul? And also, what was the reaction among the communist leaders in Eastern Europe at the time?
Yeah, it was amazing. In fact, that's now the day that we recognize as his feast day. And he was, I mean, that he came in October, and then immediately after that, about 1 week later, gave his statement about "Be not afraid," right? And the Soviets were very fearful of this because they realized right away that this was a complete game changer in the Cold War. And yeah, Tracy, there had been nothing but Italian popes for 455 years, which is amazing. I mean, it's like twice the life of the United States. So, I mean, the Pope had been Italian. So to have the first Slavic Pope ever, the first Pope ever from Poland, and Poland being right smack in the middle, really the heart of the communist bloc, the one country in the communist bloc in the Soviet Empire behind the Iron Curtain where the war on communism, where the war on religion by the communists had utterly failed. I mean, this was, they knew that this was a big deal. And on the other side, people like Ronald Reagan, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, they understood too that this was a big deal for another reason, that they saw as, wow, this is our big opportunity finally to try to take down and defeat atheistic Soviet communism.
Yeah, and another thing I want to talk about, too, is that famous trip that he took to his homeland in the summer of 1979. Do you think that played a role in the end of communism? And also, let's talk about why fighting communism was so important to him.
Yeah, in fact, it's been called 9 Days That Changed the World, right? June 2nd to 11th, 1979. And at that moment, and Tracy, after he had been selected as Pope, a few months into this, few weeks into this, probably a few days really, but his advisors said, okay, which country would you like to choose to go to first for your first foreign visit? And he said, Poland. And they said, well, Holy Father, that might kind of rock the boat. I don't know. I don't know if you can do that. The Polish authorities were already saying no. The Soviet authorities were saying no, or trying to say no. Leonid Brezhnev had already called the Polish leader and said, you've got to stop or veto any visit by this new Polish Pope. And the Polish communist leader said, his name was Edward Garrick. He said, how can I do that? He said, my people are Polish. How can I say no? How can I say no to the Pope? And Brezhnev told him, you find a way to do it. You find a way to do it, or else. And he tried. He couldn't veto it. And John Paul II insisted on going. And when he got there, they realized how, just what a mortal threat this was. There were massive numbers of people. I mean, masses of hundreds of thousands of people, crowds of millions of people turned out. You had the Polish secret police gathering around with automatic weapons around the outside of the crowd. And it was there that John Paul II told the crowd, he said, be not afraid. Be not afraid, those famous words of the angel Gabriel to Mary at the Annunciation, the words that appear throughout the New Testament. And, to them, it gave them the courage that they needed. And again, the Soviets, on the other hand, were very afraid.
I tell you, that is such an amazing story, and so many stories about him are just incredible. I know that you've written that, quote, despite his own pleas of humility, St. John Paul II really deserves great credit for his role in providing a powerful push to the end of communism in Eastern Europe. I know you touched on that a little bit. Do you think that he actually receives the credit, though, that he deserves?
Yeah, I think he really does, Tracy. In fact, if you ask most people, give me a list of, the 4 or 5 figures that were central to the end of the Cold War, you always hear Ronald Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, maybe Lech Walesa, Václav Havel, maybe Boris Yeltsin. But John Paul II is always on that list. And I should point out here, too, it's ironic. Here we are in 2021, and we're talking about this because of the feast day of John Paul II on October 22nd. But it's also, it's 30 years. It'll be the 30th anniversary of the collapse of the Soviet.
So anytime that the people motion for self-empowerment as the collective, they're going to vilify it. They're going to call it negative things, bad things. They're going to title as communism. They're going to pull out the names that is loaded with negative sentiment, because it's part of the basis for justifying action against it in order to suppress it. The secret treaty of Verona put all of these monarchical nations on the same page with this ideal. Vilifying through media, movies, news channel, grade school education, college courses, and everything else, brainwashing you to think as they think about who they want you to think in a certain way. That's the bad guy, that's the good guy. Why? Who said so? Who's saying this is a bad guy or a good guy? Who's saying? And why don't we have the right to say who we think is bad or good? The Monroe Doctrine, it gave rise to the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine was to authorize officers of the Western continent to police Latin societies. And the policing of Latin societies was to ensure that there would be consistency with the secret treaty of Verona, which was to create a guise that maintained and preserved the practice of monarchical government and leadership, which included oligarchical representation under the guise of congressional representation, thus an extension of family names rather than elected officials and representation of the people. Family names, the power of families, the power of bloodlines, the domination of family and bloodlines, which is consistent with kingship or monarchical rulership. Understand, please stay with me. Stay with me. I'm doing my best to cook this clean and neat. I pray that the Heavenly Father assists me in communicating clear, sincere, and constructive. Now, this wouldn't work without the consent of the people. In other words, I would have to make useful idiots of the people in order to pull this off. And how do you make a useful idiot? You find out what they already are set on fire for. You find out what their passions already are, what their goals and aims already are innate within themselves. And you use it as an engine or a jetpack. You mount it on your mission with the force opposing the direction that you have to propel yourself from, and you get a free ride off of their energy instead of your energy. That is a useful fucking idiot. Okay? It's just like what happened with African American females during the Obama era. Everything that they were set on fire about, they rubbed them real good on the top of their head and said, good girl, while they wagged their tail and set them on a mission that was not in their best interest, but in the best interest of continuing unum sanctum, the Verona Treaty, and many other perverse ideals that had nothing to do with the best interests of the people, but ultimately confusing the children, gender confusions, destruction of families, obliteration of marriage, increased abortions, increased STDs, depression in the children, alienation of males. I could go on and on and on and on. A useful fucking idiot. You're already headed in that direction, so let me mount you onto my mission without you having the wisdom, intelligence, and foresight or insight to perceive or conceive what the fuck I'm doing with you. And you're still serving my mission. Less energy. You ride the wave. So, what was the useful idiocy that was available? The people's belief, the people's faith. The people's belief, the people's faith. Wherever there is poverty, wherever there is struggle, wherever there are filthy rich oligarchs and monarchs and wealthy family names ruling over societies, there will be rags, dirt poor people fighting for scraps, fighting to survive, living on a hope. That's every society. Every city has that situation. And when you have a crisis like that, the people need console. All right? Here's where we come into the astrology. The people need console. Where do we get console astrologically? That is Pisces. It also includes Cancer. Its origins is with Cancer. However, its remedy or attempt at remedy, even if futile, is in Pisces. Console. So, poor people tend to be very religious. They tend to be very religious, looking for hope, looking for a mystery God to answer their prayers and to deliver. If they put more emotion behind their belief, if they put more emotion behind their prayers, somehow they can console themselves into thinking that everything will be okay. While it is known that the truth is, earth has to balance water. So flooding yourself in the waters of hope and emotion will never solve your problems. But finding the balance in earth, which is self-determination, accountability, responsibility, planning, logical assessment, discipline, obedience, order, infrastructure, okay? All of the earth expressions, that is the solution of your problems. Not praying with all kind of emotion, driving your words, sweating and crying. Lord help me. Jesus is going to make it okay. Put it in the Lord's hand. The Lord is going to fix it. And all this other bullshit. If you don't fix it, it ain't going to be fixed. That's the truth. That isn't contradiction to one's faith in God, but it's sincerity in one's faith to God, okay? And we're learning this on the earth and water, Cancer and Capricorn axis, as well as the Pisces and Virgo axis, okay? We are learning this lesson. Understand that. Now, let's get back to the point. The people tend to be very religious when they are poor. There's no other hope. How can I console myself? I'm robbing Paul to pay Peter. Do I eat bread or do I get my medication? Do I buy gas or do I pay rent? So on and so forth. The dilemma of the poor. The only way to cope, I need to be very religious. So, an old formula was brought back to surface with this. The one who set this formula, Constantine, okay? Constantine set this formula. He seen that the poor people of his society believed in a mystery God, highly emotional about what they're praying to and what they're expecting, fighting for scraps. And he utilized that useful idiocy opportunity to buy into the people's faith in order to win allegiance, deification of himself, authority, power, all through their ignorance that outweighs their faith. That's a deadly combination with people in poverty, the combination of ignorance and religious devotion. You're ignorant and you're religiously devoted at the same time. You are in a fucked up situation. And so Constantine took advantage of this. We know that when a person is in ignorance, superstition is right around the corner. Fears justified by religious devotion and obedience to some deities or deification is justified. And here goes the advantage. Constantine, lying like a motherfucker, talking about he believed in Jesus. Meanwhile, keeping his own gnosis, his own animism practices, his own deist theologies. It was a perfect way to have a pre-made, a preset, a pre-programmed society in its entirety to come out as a Christian or devoted follower of Christ. This, along with the Council of Nicaea, coined the Christian people's ideals as an official religion, while before there was Christian persecution. They were in danger, but Constantine comes along and provides the ideal of systematic security and protection over what they already were obsessed of beliefs. Meanwhile, Constantine, he knows the truth. He knows real gnosis. He knows real theology, studying from the finest schools sourced from the wisdom of Cush and ancient Kemet. That's where all of these Europeans got their gnosis from. The African theologists and first teachers. They knew the truth. But them being in personification of Ahrimanic impulses, spirit is not their interest. It's a means. Thus it becoming simple metaphysics. Metaphysics, exoteric and esoteric interpretation of one's reality that helps them to make divine claims. So with Constantine coining Christianity, he really and truly is the founder and father of Christianity, no matter how much anybody doesn't like it. Jesus was not a Christian. It's sad that that might be news to some people out there. Jesus was not a Christian. He was a Jew whose background was Judaism. He didn't come to teach religion, he came to teach ethics, ethical wisdom, sourced from matriarchal wisdom. Understand? Which in a nutshell is love and justice. The demonstration or exemplification of the laws that were before him. Understand that. Those laws being consistent with ancient Kemetic wisdom as well. So anyway, I go on. Constantine won the people under the guise of religion. And through the guise of religion, I just throw a cross on my mail, my armor, throw a cross on my shield, throw a cross on a flag, and I could be the same bloodthirsty tyrant, the same conquistador, the same oppressive settler, warmonger. But because of the people's ignorance and massive faith, they will give their life for that little sticker that I put on the front of my shield. You got your reasons why you're fighting in the battlefield. I got my reasons, but I'm hiding my reasons from you because I need you to think that your reason is the reason that I'm out here swinging a sword too. So it works for me, and you're the useful idiot. Yeah. Just like African American women who played the Trojan horse for the agenda of Obama that brought Satan out into the common world. Thank you very much. And I don't care who likes it or not. I do not care. Useful idiocy. Your ignorance is useful. You being dumb is useful. You being so bent up in faith and no knowledge is useful. And they're going to capitalize off of it. So the same pattern was coined from that point on throughout Rome and anywhere that the Spanish Inquisition and unum sanctum was to spread through the doctrine of discovery and manifest destiny. This was to remain consistent. because the people did not want monarchical governments. So there began to be many rebellions and uproars as they demanded a Republican representation for themselves. And where did this Republican representation really come from? Where did the people get those ideals? One of the places, Ma'at. Ma'at was one of the first expressions of a republic where there was justice, fairness, democracy included in the expression of the people's government.
Shechem, the content of this course, as you were explaining the process of meditation, it's centered around Ma'at. And a lot of people speak about Ma'at nowadays kind of as the principle of truth, of justice, and so on. Can you share with us why the course is centered around Ma'at and exactly what the concept of or what is Ma'at?
Okay, that's very good, right? In a Kemetic language, many words have multiplicity of meanings, but there's a main meaning. Same thing in English, but Ma'at means law. Above all the meanings that it has and associations, the most important are law and order. You see that? Meaning that, there's certain, we have faculties in the brain, in the body, in the mind, in the psyche, and the spirit. And they all must work in a lawful or ordered manner. You see that? Okay, when our psyche, our mind, and spirit are not working in an orderly manner, meaning in a lawful way, then our life is unregulated. And, this regulation in our faculties is what we call illness, what we call, bad luck, what we call is a source of failure, the inability to achieve our goals, to conduct ourselves properly, and so on. So this book, Ma'at, or the principle of Ma'at, the teachings of law and order for the spirit, mind, body, psyche, is what the Hebrew, the Jewish people, is a counterpart, is akin to what the Hebrew people call their Torah, which is the book of the law. What the Muslim people call the Quran, which is also the laws, the spiritual laws. But ancient Egypt also had the spiritual laws. They call them Ma'at. And this was the most sacred part of ancient Egyptians' teachings. You see that? The laws that govern the faculties that govern your life. You see that? Because if you're not manifesting all laws of the spirit, mind, and psyche working in an integral, orderly manner, your life will not be well. And this is what the teachings of Ma'at is all about. You see that? Now, where do we learn this from? Well, there's a faculty, your spirit has 11 faculties in them. The same way your physical body has a number of faculties, digestive system, respiratory system. Well, the spirit is also an entity with multiple faculties. You see that? Okay? So one of these faculties is the Ma'at faculty itself. When you activate that faculty and it's working in a vigorous, empowering manner, then now, it puts your mind in order. You see that? It creates order within the mind. When there's order in your mind, you are able to give orderly command and responses to the challenges and events in your life. You see that? Okay? So when this faculty is not activated and informing you and your mind, your responses to life challenges are disorderly or unlawful, or what we call sin or criminal behavior, unsocial behavior, or messing up in your business and so on. You see that? Disorder in the body is nothing else but illness. You see that disorder, when you fail in your business and in your school work and on the job, okay, when you are unable to use your psychic abilities to attract wealth to yourself, to attract good.
The other places was in Islamic jurisprudence, the Sharia, the Muslim societies, which always have consisted of Muslims, Jews, and Christians harmoniously together. That has always been the case. Even till today, you have Muslim trustees who watch over the most sacred sites that both Muslims, Jews, and Christians share of historical sites. Because the Islamic jurisprudence has always been a matriarchal source, not patriarchal. Monarchical government or monarchical government, kingship and such, these type of systems are patriarchal, not matriarchal. Regardless if it's a female ruling or not, it is still patriarchal. It suppresses the divine right and inalienable rights of the people, the natural state and expression of the people. The constitutions that represent different republics are to preserve the natural inalienable rights and identity and expressions of the people as a reflection of matriarchal source beings. Okay? This is the fucking point. Christianity was erected in order to move power in disguise. Power in disguise. To move policy, programming, control in disguise. Many people say, oh, religious control, religious control. They say that, but they're not able to explain why it's control. Okay? There's a lot of regurgitation out there. People bumping their gums, saying this and saying that, but never able to explain. That's the part that pissed me the fuck off. I swear to God, I could lick 20 shots in the air behind that. That shit pisses me off. You out here bumping your gums, but you can't explain what the fuck you're talking about. So please shut the fuck up. Understand that. We got enough of that. Phonies and fakes who want attention. Phonies and fucking fakes. So I go on to proceed. What is it about Christianity at that point that became a source of control? As I explained, useful idiocy was the leverage for this to take place. And what ended up happening is that the Pope was to replace the monarchical king or queen for those societies, countries, or nations who had before the people agreements to erect republics or democracies. They were able to undermine the republican democracy that they proposed to the people through the guise of papal influence. The papal influence is what preserved family names and titles that were to survive estate, wealth, status, power, influence, while also determining policies, codes, and laws under the guise of democracy. Because in order to influence the republic, you have to go through a democracy expression or proposal to get the people of the republic to subject themselves through their own consent to those policies that otherwise they would have a moral objection to. And if I give an example of that, The United States is a republic. This is a republic. But if I can get you to buy into the idea that it is a democracy, we then can make policies, laws, amendments based on the authority of the people's feelings and sentiments, but not in consistency with the republic and the Constitution. It's a way of usurping the Constitution, is that you justify it by saying, based on the feedback of the people, we are going to go around this constitutional law or limitation. And that can easily be manufactured through media, commercials, entertainment, actors, celebrities, politicians, brainwashing and social engineering of the mind state and attitude of the people through females. All of these are different ways that they can manufacture your consent, manufacture your opinion, manufacture your outlook and your perception. Another tactic is through fear, fear-mongering. If there's a direction that the papal order through unum sanctum wants to go, and it contradicts or challenges the people's moral compass, and they say there's no way we could allow you to do that, we won't vote for that, well, it's easy. They simply create a crisis of violence and terror and fear that goes around your moral convictions and has you to consent to whatever will neutralize the threat that they are proposing to you, although it is not really a threat. It is a fictitious image, ideal, or even scenario that they create in order to win it. For example, Donald Trump recently had a hard time gaining consent to go into Chicago with the military. And as you know, it's against the Constitution, except by declaration of state of emergency, so on and so forth. So with the limitation of routes that he can take to bring military presence into the state to use on citizens, the people would never agree with it, except for, you know, some of the people with MAGA hats smashed down on the fucking head. Make America great again, you know, and all this other stuff. You have to create fear to step over moral convictions. So if the people have a moral conviction from a libertarian standpoint, which libertarian is just a polarity in all of us to rebel, you know, to rebel injustices, to rebel unfairness, inequalities, anything of Libra energy that goes into shadow or detriment, we manifest the libertarian expression of ourselves in order to bring the scales back. Okay, that's libertarian. Understand that. So, in order to step over that moral conviction, hey, don't bring the military to Chicago. Yes, it's bad violence, but why haven't you exhausted all your resources? Why aren't you holding people accountable? You know, beef up the police state, whatever, different things like that. You're going to send a military. Okay, if we let you do that, then you could do it in the next state and the next state. And next thing you know, we have martial law. You see, so Trump, let me be careful how I say this. Days after he gets feedback of rejection to go into Chicago, all of a sudden over Labor Day weekend, there's 50 shots rang out and several people got shot. And, you know, it was violent in a park in Chicago. Okay. It's things like that. And so if you can get CIA or whoever else to create a violent situation, then later on they can hit the press conference and say, see, I told you there's violence in Chicago. They're all over there killing each other. We need to go in there. And then the people who are glued to their cell phones with fucking bird brains, There's, oh, see, it's violence. Yeah, you need to send the military over there. Forward march. So next thing you know, you got military over there. People don't think. Most people are not intelligent. I'm just saying that. Let's keep it a buck. Most people don't use the fucking head. People are just on autopilot. Whatever you tell them, they do it. That's the average person. Nobody thinks. It's the oldest trick in the book. Look at 9/11. There's no justifiable reason for you to go into Iraq. There's no justifiable reason for you to be all the way over there in Afghanistan or whatever else. But you know what? If I blow up this building, the people will beg me to go over there. You see how that works? So if you tell me I shouldn't drive your car, and let's say I'm a mechanic, and you tell me, hey, no, under no circumstance are you to drive my car, and then I go out there at night and I take out, I'll loosen up the air mass flow, hose, or I'll loosen up the timing belt, you know what I'm saying, or something like that, or I'll put a little cut on the fan belt, right? And while you're driving, you hear some noise. That fear will have you come back to me and say, hey, maybe you need to drive my car. Yeah, I told you I need to drive the car. See, you should have listened to me. That's how it works. Fear steps over critical thought and judgment. It steps over moral commitment. It steps over that. Where's the fear? Pisces. Where has Saturn been teaching us about this technique? Pisces. Have we learned yet? I don't know. We're going to find out in a retrograde. You see how that works? Fear. Where is the moral commitment? Cancer. What's being expanded? Moral commitment. If moral commitment is expanded through Jupiter in Cancer, what is it expanding or inflating itself against? The provocation of fear that gets you to buy into decisions that are against your best interests because you want to remove the threat or the illusion of the threat. And this is in macrocosm and microcosm in your personal life as well. So do not skip over that part. Also review that idea in your life personally, how that uniquely manifests. Okay? Please follow me. Listen. Please listen. So, the Pope, even since the Spanish Inquisition, they had to go against Islam. They had to go against Jews, the real Jews. I'm not talking about them Europeans over there mistreating people who pretended to be Jews. They had to go against them, and Rome went against their people, but in disguise based on Constantine's strategy, okay? They had to do that because what do all of them have in common? They all are matriarchal expressions, not patriarchal. That's what they got in common, which is to lead with compassion, to lead with humanity, to lead with advocacy within the infrastructure of society, to lead with sensitivity and care for women and children. And the expression of that matriarchal source, Cancer, it manifests through Libra, ethical conduct and protocol, justice, truth, freedom, equality, love. You see? And so that's what they all have in common. All over the globe, what do all people of the earth have in common? They all had matriarchal religions. Native Americans, from sea to shining sea, wherever these conquistadors, these Roman conquistadors or these Spanish conquistadors, wherever they went with their patriarchal forces, their patriarchal expressions, they ran into indigenous people who were practicing matriarchal religions and spiritualities and systems, which led with compassion and humanity. That's a problem. So the first problem was to dismantle and disengage the greatest matriarchal force that contended locally to the Constantinian Roman ideal to spread throughout Europe, Spain, and Africa. And that was the Moors and the Jews. They had to get rid of Moors and Jews. And this was how or why the justification of the Crusades. The Crusades had to take place because Constantinian's Roman Catholic ideals of patriarchy could not spread unless they dismantled and got out of the way the threat or the authority, the power, the wealth, the deep anchor, the long-reaching arm of the Moors, the Moorish Empire that stretched all the way from from North Africa, Europe, here to the Americas and the continents of the North and South Americas and the islands and parts of Asia. They had to challenge that because it was the only way to establish themselves and to continue the legacy of that Constantinian spread of the Roman ideal of control and power through matriarchy, which is an Ahrimanic impulse in the earth. That is Ahriman in the flesh. The principalities that even the Bible speaks of, the principalities in high places, what is that? Those are those names of those Europeans and guys such as the Jewish Rothschilds and Rockefellers, the homeless Europeans who walked the earth, who couldn't find a place to settle. So instead, they practiced piracy, domination, violence, and abuse all over the earth. These names, Medici, today you have the Kushners, Kushner, Donald Trump's daughter married one of the Kushners. Anybody from New York City, that name Kushner is heavy in New York, where you have the strongest concentration of Jews. This shit is deep, man. And it's the Vatican that made sure that literature, throughout these crusades, the most valuable thing and the most threatening thing was literature, knowledge. That was the most valuable thing and the most threatening thing. So the chambers in the Vatican that stretch miles of libraries, well, I don't want to say miles, but hundreds of feet of libraries. This was the inheritance of the treasures of these wars, the booty of these wars, which included gold, silver, currency, but it also included artifacts, obviously, things of value. But the most important thing was the literature that they were able to procure, inherit, steal, and collect. The literature, the knowledge, that was the most important thing, was the knowledge of the Moors, inherited by their forefathers. The knowledge of the Moors that innovated the findings and conclusions of Kush and Kemet and Ethiopia. Such knowledge that spread all the way here to North and South America, where it was already established and civilized by the Moorish Muslims. Yes, and they was black as tar, nappy-headed, broad-nosed, yeah, what they would call today niggas, was already fucking here. That's the one secret that they cannot let get out. They cannot let that slip out. So the books have to be tightly secured, because one thing they can't do is let it be known who niggas really are. Hitler tried to expose it. He He gave up the ghost. He was dedicated on making it known. That's how Europe came out of their rut. The Europeans, the white people of Europe, not the Africans or the black people that was already there, so-called, who was there first. But that's how they came out of the Dark Ages in a rut. It was through such information that they made exclusive to themselves, for themselves, and they still do the same thing today. People of poor classes, middle classes, don't matter what race you are, you don't get taught anything valuable. You get taught how to be a good worker. Rothschild Rockefeller family made sure that that is the case. Remember, Rothschild Rockefeller, those are principalities. The Zuckerbergs, the these type of names, these are the principalities in high places. These are the principalities in high places. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. These are principalities, the leverage of names, the powers of names. Understand that, especially Jewish. These names, specifically Rockefeller, as I mentioned, and Rothschild, who started the General Education Board, 1902, it standardized education not to break the secret Treaty of Verona ideal, which was to discourage communistic ideals, libertarian ideals, democratic ideals, and any type of empowerment for the people to make rebellion. And that was in the shadow of fear concerning Napoleon Bonaparte and what he pulled off. They don't want another Napoleon Bonaparte. Little Muhammad. Let me remind you of that again. They don't want another one of those.
When Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt, he had a lot of wonderful things to say about Islam, Muslims, and the Prophet Muhammad. In my opinion, the sincerity of this was dubious because it was pretty clear that this was pandering propaganda. However, later in his life, after he was defeated and imprisoned on the island of St. Helena, he defended both the Prophet Muhammad and the second Caliph Omar ibn Khattab in his memoirs. Considering his circumstances, I'm convinced that his words were much more sincere. Napoleon commented on the play The Fanatic, written by Voltaire, who was famously hostile to religion, including Islam. The play was a denigrating and almost completely fictionalized account of the Prophet Muhammad. To give you an example of how ridiculously inaccurate it was, one of the main characters was Zopir, the leader of Mecca, who rejected the Prophet because he believed in quote-unquote free will and liberty. Voltaire was clearly projecting his own beliefs and prejudices on these characters. This is what Napoleon had to say. Quote, Voltaire, in the character and conduct of his hero, has departed from both nature and history. He has degraded Muhammad by making him descend to the lowest intrigues. He has represented a great man who changed the face of the world, acting like a scoundrel, worthy of the gallows. He has no less absurdly travestied the character of Omar, which he has drawn like that of a cutthroat in a melodrama. End quote. You can clearly see how incensed Napoleon is that Voltaire would portray the Prophet Muhammad in this way. Now, I want to move on to another topic which I think should be addressed, and that's that some Muslims believe that Napoleon converted to Islam. This quote should put that rumor to rest. Quote, in every country, religion is useful to the government, and those who govern ought to avail themselves of it to influence mankind. I was a Mohammedan in Egypt. I am a Catholic in France. End quote. That explains why he may have made overtures to appear as though he converted to Islam when he invaded Egypt. However, if that's not convincing enough, here's another quote from his memoirs. Quote, I never followed any of the tenets of that religion. I never prayed in the mosques. I never abstained from wine or was circumcised. Neither did I ever profess it. I said merely that we are the friends of the Mussulmans and that I respected Muhammad their prophet, which was true. I respect him now. End quote. Napoleon truly admired the Prophet Muhammad, and he went so far as to defend him. Despite his conduct as emperor, Napoleon seems to have been well educated on the Prophet and wasn't a victim of the common biases and prejudices of the time. His attitude might be a good template for the rampant Islamophobia of France today.
The Vatican is designed to be the center of espionage, surveillance, tracking, papal orders such as bulls, and it has its leverage in the people's ignorance and faith in the site being sacred, which indeed the site is sacred, but it's sacred to the people in a different context than it is sacred to the ones who use the people's ideal of sacredness as a leverage for useful idiocy up on them. So yes, we're at the same place utilizing the same symbols of sentiment, but your reason for being here in utility is different than my reason for being here in utility. Your reason is the sincerity of your heart to devote yourself to these sacred symbols of the earth, such as Peter's gravesite, allegedly. The Basilica of Peter that took its strongest anchorage with the people, and Constantine doing a symbolic upgrade of that site, once again using his money to buy the people's allegiance, anchoring himself in the sacred ideals that they already have in their heart, being whatever they wanted him to be for them so that he can have the power of the people at his disposal. It's like an abusive man that just strings along a sincere woman that just wants to love him, but he just uses that for his best advantage. It's like one of those stories. And so it's the location, the symbolism, the arts, following the Renaissance, Leonardo and Michelangelo contributing to the construction of the Vatican to be a mesmerizing sight that blows minds. It's a provocation of the people's sentiment and giving them the theater, the imagery, the material connection that they want to have in the name of their faith, which really it contradicts the idea of faith, because you're telling me or you're telling them that they have to have these buildings immaculate, laced in all kinds of gold and riches, ornaments, illustrious and mind-blowing artistry, for you to have a mustard grain of faith, standing in awe of God because you're just so impressed and inspired by the grand beauty of all of this art. That in and of itself is Luciferic. And it is Luciferic because it is the exact expression of detriment of Venus, the shadow of Venus. O great one, how art thou fallen from heaven? O morning star, how art thou fallen from heaven? In truth, what they are worshiping is Lucifer, because it's the luster that they're there for. It's the steps and rites of animism that they're there for. It's to romanticize these symbols, the beauty, the physicality, the material. And all over again, in contradiction, these same Christians are repeating the very energy and spirit that Jesus entered the temple of those spiritual officials of his time period, taking claim to be the holders and guardians of sacred religious rites. He called them a den of vipers and thieves. So can't you see how the Vatican is just a repetition of that exact same expression and practice to be a den of vipers and thieves? You are in religious representation, but beguiling the people through useful idiocy and their attachment to these symbols and physical things to provoke their idea of faith, which really is just console that they're looking for. Meanwhile, they're in ignorance, total ignorance, in the blind faith that they're following, stripping themselves poor and naked to fund these constructions. It's the very reason why Jesus went into the temple and flipped the tables over and started cussing niggas out. Meanwhile, here everybody goes in total contradiction of that, doing the exact same thing as you go to the Vatican, as you go to these Catholic ornamental religious rites, in awe of all of this expensive stuff that came from robbing the people, stealing from the people, embezzling from the people, playing the people, lying to the people, manipulating the people, and that's what funds it. Even down to the 5013C Skull and Bones Agreement 322. Thank you. Research it. Look it up. Know what you're talking about. Secret Society of Harvard. It upholds the same mission as all these secret societies do, inheriting that knowledge that they got from these conquistador, crusade, and Spanish Inquisition missions. Get the books, save the books, hide the books, lock up the books. We will retain the information. We will get strong from the information. We will empower ourselves with that information as we dethrone them. And then we will rewrite history to make it look like we are the source and origin of such ideals, knowledge, information, expression, art, science, experience, scholarship, gnosis, theology. And they are not. They are not the origin. They are the students of the earth. They are the students of the teachers of the earth. They have always been the students, not the teachers. And it's the same with the Greek. It's no shade on the Greek. You know what I mean? But we got to stay consistent with what the real truth is. The Greek are students. They are students of Kemet, students of Imhotep, students of Africans, students of Moors. All of Spain is students of Moors. The Renaissance came out in a blast. Why? Because of what they inherited and got from the Crusades, what they inherited and got from the takeovers. Knowledge, information, know-how, revelation. That's what brought on that dawn of the Venus energy. You conquered Venus to inherit Venus. And Venus is Islam. Judaism is Saturn. Venus is Islam. Understand that. Christianity goes more so with Pisces and Neptune. And no wonder, part of it is an illusion. Part of it. However, it does emphasize the Christ impulse, which goes back to the sun in Pisces. Understand? So, globally, the secret treaty of Verona is to get the whole world on the same page with unum sanctum. And the intent of the Spanish Inquisition, which was to suppress matriarchal authorities and powers that pose threat to their spread of patriarchal rulership and law, as monarchical governments under the guise of Republican societies or democratic societies under the guise of. This was not to disturb or provoke the people while also still operating the same. And this is how the monarchical rulership and government, it now became the Pope. The Pope became the monarch. It's just like Israel. If I use the word Israel, you go back to your Bible, and in ignorance and fear, you're all up in sentiment and in awe and romanticization of the word, the term Israel. Ooh, that's of God. Don't go against God. God, God, God. Israel, Israel and God. That's how they want you to be. They want you to be dumb like a motherfucker, just like that. Retarded, straight retarded. Licking the windows, picking your boogers, looking all around, dumb as a box of fucking rocks. If we use the word Israel and hide behind that motherfucker, they ain't never gonna figure it out. They're gonna want to protect us. They're gonna give us money. They're gonna jump in front of a speeding bullet for us. They'll do anything to protect us and make sure that we're defended. And they'll never see through the illusion. Why? Because they think they're going against God if they go against Israel. The term Israel. Are you following? Y'all niggas better wake up. Y'all niggas better wake the fuck up. Stop playing and wake up. You ain't got a lot of time. Y'all better get the message. It's hiding behind names and terms. It's hiding behind it. Yeah, Israel, a corporate state. Not the Israel of the Bible. They ain't religious. They don't believe in Judaism. They're not Orthodox Jews. They're Zionists. And anti-Semitic, they took ownership of that term, Semites. Arabs are Semites too. But yet they took hostage of the term. They told you that the Holocaust was the worst thing that ever happened in human history. But yet, if you look at King Leopold of Congo, he did thrice as much as Hitler did. But yet, why is he not mentioned as a monster? Why is he not even mentioned in the history books? Because he killed niggas. And that's okay. That's okay. Who became the number one importer of slaves? Jewish people. Who was the ones that centralized banks? Jewish people. Jewish people. How did they get a beginning? With T-bonds and setting up oligarchs under the guise of congressmen and such. Where did they get the leverage for that? After the bankruptcy caused deliberately by Abraham Lincoln, because they used Abraham Lincoln, the fact that during that time period of the 1820s up until 1860, up until 1850 something. Okay, I have to look that up. But anyway, the time period 1820s up until 1860s, it was illegal for a person who held a title, including the Bar Association as an attorney, you could not hold office in United States, America, Republic, because it was against the Islamic Sharia and jurisprudence. That was part of the first peace treaty between Morocco and Muslim Moors and the Americas. So they deliberately undermined that based on that secret treaty of Verona. They undermined it on purpose, and they put Abraham Lincoln in that position on purpose. And what ended up happening is he caused bankruptcy to the United States of France. And the United States of France then had to demand that dollar back through the Americas, the United States of Americas. And the only way to make that demand was through the 14th Amendment and the ratification of the 13th Amendment. Okay? The 13th Amendment, which allowed them to tax every damn thing in the country. as well as making chattel slavery illegal, while making a clause for slavery to still be legal for prisoners, those incarcerated. And the 14th Amendment was to save himself from the massive debt that he incurred from the war and also from the collapse of the economy of France, which, if I convert these so-called African Americans, which Abraham Lincoln himself during a trial acknowledged that he was aware that African Americans were Moors. He acknowledged it. Thank you very much. Even Abraham Lincoln was laughed at and made fun of for being and called a Moor because they suspected that he had a black foremother and he was a Moor, and he defended a client that he acknowledged publicly as being a Moor and not black. He subjugated those slaves to a new status as citizens based on that, which made those citizens taxable. And it also made them qualified in import, export, or commercial work under fictitious charactership. They are now fictitious characters that can be taxed. So this is the definition of the 1040. It's the fraction of that war debt. And it's how he would pay it back. So it wasn't about, oh, compassion, love, I want to free black people. No, he was in a pickle. He was in a dilemma with war debt. And also with the fact that he caused the collapse in France.
In early 1866, these new governments in the South, all white governments created by Andrew Johnson, kind of have to deal with the situation of the former slaves. What is their status going to be? What rights are they going to have? And so they passed these laws to regulate the conditions of the former slaves. So the black codes are really an attempt to use the power of the government to get the plantation system going again. Not as slave labor, that's gone, but as forced labor, where blacks would be paid some minimal wage, but they would have no alternative but to go to work for white employers. They don't go into effect. In fact, in early 1866, Congress passes the Civil Rights Law, which actually says that all laws must apply equally to all citizens. And that abrogates all these black codes because they're only for blacks. But they're important as a sign of what the white South has in mind for blacks unless the federal government comes in and protects them. Now, they give them some rights. They're no longer slaves. They can't be bought and sold. Their marriages are now going to be legally recognized as they weren't under slavery. They can own property in some states. Actually, Mississippi barred them from owning land. But that's it. They had no right to vote. They had no right to serve on juries. They had no right to testify in court in cases involving white people. They could not own guns the way white people could. And most importantly, they had to go to work for white people. They had to sign year-long labor contracts with a white employer. Otherwise, they would be called vagrants, arrested, fined, and if they couldn't pay the fine, they'd be auctioned off to some white person who could pay the fine. So in other words, a black guy with land working for himself, that's illegal. You got to work for a white employer. He'd be arrested as a vagrant and sold to a white employer, basically. They couldn't go to work for themselves. They couldn't follow a trade, something like that. That's why Mississippi barred them from even owning land, so that they had no alternative but to work for white planters. So the black codes are a very, very restrictive idea of what freedom really would mean for these former slaves.
So France wanted all that back, plus the war debt. This was explanation behind 13th and 14th Amendment adjustments. And this later on would become a point of confusion with so-called African Americans who are socially designated with these titles: Black, Negro, colored, African American. It's no such damn thing. We are Moors, Aboriginals. We are literally the Native Americans, some of us. And there are some who came from Africa as slaves, yes. But most of us here were already here as Moors. The secret that can't get out is the fact that we are Moors. Because what comes with claiming of our true status and identity as Moors is the largest estate in the world. And the largest estate in the world is what they were able to initiate the first creation of T-bonds or trust bonds based on the lost and stolen identity by registering us as dead at sea or lost at sea, which is why you hear me often say, I'm not dead at sea. I am true and living. I am a Moor. No, we not gone. Most of us are lost, yes, but we not dead and lost at sea. The worst thing that can happen is for it to be commonly known and stated that most of us is not Africans that got shipped over from Africa, but we was Moorish Muslims that was already fucking here. And that includes even some people who identify as Latino, who actually are not Latino necessarily, but due to conquistadors, Spanish conquistadors taking over those territories, for example, such as the Arawak, such as the Taino, Boricuas or Puerto Ricans, Borinqua, Central America, Nicaragua, Chile, even Mexico. The Moorish Empire spread throughout all of this. So Moor is not only the nappy-headed, nigga like myself. It's people who have blood that's original to these estates, North and South America, all the way over to Spain and Europe and Northern Africa, all throughout. But by claiming that we cannot claim based on a dead status, a corpse status, we become then ward of state, and the corp is consistent with the birth certificate and social security number. That is literally a corpse, because a living, true and living person cannot do commerce except through agency or an attorney. Come on, man. This is why you got to come out of the illusion of the fictitious character. And this is what Pisces is here to release us from, as Saturn is saving us from this entrapment, this illusionment. We're supposed to come out of it this time. Neptune is in Aries. It's dissolving the illusions around identity and what it really means. And the illusions of the church, Pisces, Neptune. Saturn has brought karma to all of the lies that were promulgated through that, revealing and exposing the truth of it. The Catholic Church, the Pope, was a continuation of Constantine's Roman domination over the entire world through Unum Sanctum and Doctrine of Discovery. And the Doctrine of Discovery was violent. It was brutal. Unspeakable. The Secret Treaty of Verona, it preserves conservative values. It preserves conservative ideals, which is why you see the escalation of conservatism in America, because it is the revival, reinstatement of Christian nationalism, which is white supremacy, Anglo-Saxon white supremacy, Roman Catholicism.
Has been in the headlines quite a bit recently, but what does it really mean? Laura Barón Lopez recently spoke to one expert to better understand the concept and its reach in American society.
Brad Onishi is a former evangelical minister who once identified as a Christian nationalist himself. He left the church in 2005 and began studying religion from the outside, including extremism. He now hosts the popular podcast Straight White American Jesus and is the author of Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. I began by asking him what that term actually means.
Christian nationalism is an ideology that is based around the idea that this is a Christian nation, that this was founded as a Christian nation, and therefore it should be a Christian nation today and should be so in the future. According to survey data, Christian nationalists agree with statements like the federal government should declare the United States of America a Christian nation. Our laws should be based on Christian values. Being a Christian is important if you want to be a real American.
Onishi tracks a number of subgroups and ideas under the umbrella of white Christian nationalism, including what's known as the New Apostolic Reformation.
Well, the New Apostolic Reformation is notable for a number of reasons. One, it's built around the idea that Christians are called to a new transformation or reformation of the United States. These are Christians who want to revolutionize the way that our country looks and to make it great again in terms of being a Christian nation. They also are deeply invested in the notion of spiritual warfare, the idea that we are called as Christians to fight a cosmic battle between good and evil, and that it's our duty to be boots on the ground for God in that conflict. What this has led to some decades later is the New Apostolic Reformation leaders, the apostles and the prophets that are really at the head of this movement, were some of the earliest to support Donald Trump in 2016, and they've remained steadfast in that support. They were at the very avant-garde of trying to get the 2020 election overturned in the wake of Joe Biden's victory and mobilizing folks to be at January 6th. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of New Apostolic Reformation Christians at January 6th, as an example.
We know that 2/3 of white evangelicals sympathize or adhere to white Christian nationalist beliefs. So where do they fall within this larger movement?
I think white evangelicals are the group we think of when we think of white Christian nationalism, and for good reason. These are folks who, when we think about the Iowa caucuses, in 2016, Trump's white evangelical voters were about 20% of his share of voters in that cycle. Just a few weeks ago, in 2024, that grew to well over 50%. White evangelicals remain committed to the MAGA movement, and one of the key indicators of why is Christian nationalism.
Are there leaders across these subgroups of white Christian nationalism that are tied to the former president directly or to his larger network?
Yes. For example, a group of New Apostolic Reformation leaders, apostles and prophets and others, were present at the White House a week before January 6th. Speaker Mike Johnson has direct ties to the New Apostolic Reformation. Speaker Mike Johnson is somebody who's sought the counsel and the friendship of Timothy Carcaden, who is a New Apostolic Reformation pastor from his home district in Shreveport, Louisiana. Timothy Carcaden is a close associate with Dutch Sheets. Dutch Sheets is perhaps the most ardent Trump supporter in the New Apostolic Reformation. He's the one who may have done the most of any Christian leader in the United States to mobilize folks to try to overturn the 2020 election and to make sure to attend January 6th. One of the most frightening things, I think, about Mike Johnson is the flag he hangs outside of his office, an Appeal to Heaven flag. The Appeal to Heaven flag goes back to the Revolutionary War, George Washington. It was inspired by John Locke. But over the last 10 years, the Appeal to Heaven flag has been popularized by Dutch Sheets. Dutch Sheets sees the Appeal to Heaven flag as a symbol of Christian revolution. If you look closely at January 6th, you will see dozens of Appeal to Heaven flags. It may have a long history, but in the contemporary context, it has a very specific meaning. So the fact that Mike Johnson has it hanging outside of his office, to me signifies how he understands his role as Speaker of the House in terms of being a Christian and being an American.
In a statement to the NewsHour, a spokesperson for Johnson's office said, quote, "The Speaker has long appreciated the rich history of the flag. Any implication that the Speaker's use of the flag is connected to the events of January 6th is wildly inaccurate." But Onishi says the concerning links go beyond the conservative politicians themselves. Last month, Lance Wallnau, a key New Apostolic Reformation figure, announced he was partnering with Charlie Kirk, the influential right-wing activist who leads Turning Point USA.
They're going to be visiting and focusing on swing states, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania. They've claimed they've already signed up 2,500 churches, and they want to mobilize those churches directly for political involvement and specifically to get Trump reelected. The two of them together signifies a crossover. It signifies a joining in a way that promises, I think, to be quite potent.
It is Constantinianism. Only white males get to be relevant under that energy. It is Oromonic. Even white females ain't getting no play in that because they gonna step on their necks too, just like they did in the beginning. They gonna step on a white girl's necks too.
From the nation's capital, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth attended the first service. The church is part of the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches, and its aim is global Christian domination under a strict interpretation of the Bible. In this Situation Room special report, my colleague Pamela Brown went to Moscow, Idaho, to meet the controversial pastor behind it.
Christchurch senior pastor Doug Wilson makes no apologies for his beliefs on God and country.
I'd like to see the town be a Christian town. I'd like to see the state be a Christian state. I'd like to see the nation be a Christian nation. I'd like to see the world be a Christian world.
And now Wilson's controversial views as a Christian nationalist are gaining sway in the nation's center of power with the recent opening of his new church and high-profile parishioners like Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Is planting a church in D.C. part of your mission to try to turn this into a Christian nation?
Yes. So every society is theocratic. The only question is who's theo. In a secular democracy, it would be demos, the people. In a Christian republic, it'd be Christ.
Well, what would you say to someone watching this to say, look, I'm a Muslim. Who are you to say your worldview is better than mine, that your God is better than mine?
Well, if I went to Saudi Arabia, I would fully expect to live under their God's rules.
But you said earlier that you want this to be a Christian world.
Yes.
So you want to supplant their religion with your Christian.
Yes, by peaceful means, by sharing the gospel. There's a lot of work yet to do. I believe that we are working our little corner of the vineyard.
Wilson's Little Corner, a picturesque campus nestled on the outskirts of downtown Moscow, Idaho, is growing by the day with thousands of like-minded Christians. Parishioners of his church, known as Kirkers, own and operate several businesses downtown, next to liberal college town stores.
If it's true.
Why did he yell boo? Because it's
because of me.
Because of you.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
That's a regular day for you.
That's not unusual.
A big focus of his Christian movement is on a patriarchal society where men are dominant and women are expected to submit to their husbands.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
So you just think they're meant to have babies. That's it. They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically. The wife and mother, who is the chief executive of the home, is entrusted with 3 or 4 or 5 eternal souls.
I'm here as a working journalist, and I'm a mom of 3.
Good for you.
Is that an issue for you?
No, it's not automatically an issue.
Josh and Amy Prince, along with their 4 kids, moved here from Washington State.
Do you see Amy as your equal?
Yes and no. In the sense that we're both saved by grace, we're absolutely on equal footing. But we have very different purposes, God-given.
But do you see yourself as the head of the household, as the man?
He is the head of our household. Yes, and I do.
For these people, Christianity, it's a tool. It's a means to an end. It's an instrument for control, regulation, and suppression of the natural impulse in every person to preserve their inalienable rights. It manifests patriarchy over all. Knuckle-dragging, misogynistic domination of females, which eclipses the value, contribution, power and wisdom, opportunity, and the matriarchal archetype, the woman. They are short of the insight, short of the wisdom, short of the understanding, the full scope and capacity of the woman's nature and her role, her contribution. The patriarchal, Ahrimanic, stubborn, arrogant, narcissistic, greedy monarchs they're even willing to turn it on their own women of their own community. So we can't have blind faith. Ignorance is dangerous. Fear is dangerous. Just jumping on a bandwagon because everybody's over here or everybody's over there. When you see a cross or any other symbols, you can't associate and attach sentimental ideals to physical objects. Because soon as you get into that habit, you'll be strung along into manipulation of the very sentiment that you attach to it. Anything that holds truth and value in a spiritual sense, it transcends all forms. Therefore, the irony of attaching to physical instruments. A damn cross? Yes, to you it might hold some sentiment, but let's not forget the same cross was burned in the front yard of African Americans, so-called, set on fire right in the front yard just less than 60 years ago right here in this country. What is you talking about? The same cross that pulled up to every shore of every nation, doing unspeakable acts of inhumane violence and oppression, tyranny and domination. So it's from heart to heart who is Christian and who is not. It's from heart to heart. This is not to discourage anybody from Christianity if that's your thing. But what I'm saying is, let's review our intentions and what we are attaching ourselves to or not. Understand? Now, on another thought, surveillance, espionage, control of media, suppression of information, it's all part of maintaining what they call balance and order. It's all part of it.
If you said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit, I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
So I wanted to show you this. This is Catherine Fitz. We've had her on the show before, and she was in the George W. Bush administration, and ever since then, she's been kind of a truth teller. So I'm going to play this video of Catherine Austin Fitz, and we'll get your response.
And what it looks to me like Trump and Musk are implementing the control grid at high speed. What you have to say is, okay, to do a control grid, we need a digital ID implemented that's very high quality, high precise. Check the box. We need an all digital financial system. Check the box. You know, we need a way of doing interoperable money. Check the box. If you look at what Doge is doing, we need a social credit system. Check the box.
Wait, what do you mean by that? What Doge is doing?
Danny, they've been aggregating this kind of data. I used to call it the data beast. So they've been aggregating this kind of powerful data since the 90s. So I don't think this is all new. So, for example,
IRS data, healthcare data. and combining it all together into
Yeah,
one
but-
system combined with AI.
It's interesting because Musk was out raising capital for XAI and had to deal with Palantir AI at the same time. And my guess, I think
Palantir has an AI?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Well, according to published reports, XAI and Palantir had made a partnership, and when Musk was sucking all this data out. And my guess is that data is, they sucked it into the AI on the just do it method. So if I wanted to stop fraud in the U.S. government, I would say there's 20 trillion missing from DOD, there's $1 trillion missing from HUD. I'm going to go in, figure out where it went, and get it back.
Right.
That's not what they did. If you said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit, I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
Because white girls are too liberal for them. And yes, I know I talk my junk about liberalism. But to look at things with two eyes instead of one eye, it's liberal energy that stops oppression. It's liberal energy that stands up and fights against when somebody's going too far. And that is Libra. That is the illumination of Libra. That's the intent and will of Libra. That's the protective wings of Ma'at that stretches over every city. She is protecting the city. So liberalism is what protects the rights of the people. But when it goes too far and it turns into useful idiocy where you think that you are fighting for something right and you are standing up in ignorance running your damn mouth like Jasmine Crockett does and so many other characters, you ass backwards, you fighting for Satan and don't even know it, but you think that you're doing something just and righteous, that is when it's a problem. That's when liberalism is a problem. Otherwise, liberalism is the saving grace of society. It is by which the revolutionaries come through. It is the energy by which revolution makes its way into the expressions of the people. But when ignorance is behind that, it is dangerous. Because it's one thing to be a revolutionary for your own desires, but revolution is for the revelation. Rebellion is for the truth and justice. Let's understand that. Revolution and revelation must always be on behalf and in the name of the matriarchal foundation, Cancer, and the moon. If it is not for the matriarchal expression, it is in violation. How is modern day liberalism in matriarchal favor when it goes against boys and girls knowing if they got a penis or a vagina? When it goes against man and woman loving each other, raising children and being a family, when it goes against marriage, when it goes against all that is natural. So y'all do the math. Y'all do the math. And after you're done thinking about it, some people out there owe me an apology, dead ass. After you get done thinking about that shit. Because niggas get mad at me all the time for pointing out the fucking obvious. But I see with two eyes. There's no favoritism. Call it like I fucking see it. So this patriarchy, it hides itself through the Roman Catholic will. The secret treaty of Verona, it highlights that. And when you get the, what is called, and when you get what is called the Monroe Doctrine, okay? This is the part where that allows the United States to have entitlement to exercise authority and aggression even over the entire North and South American continent, over the West. Understand that. But we might think that we're elected officials and things are going a natural course. No, it's not. It's still oligarchs, not congressmen, is filthy rich oligarchs, just like it was during the monarchical rulership of kings and queens. And they purchase, they buy, they fund campaigns that brainwash the people, campaigns that engineer the sentiment, campaigns that tells you how to think and how to feel. There are billions and billions of dollars that are spent to get you to think and believe and feel a certain way. And Christianity plays a role in that. The churches are bought. They are bought and sold by 501(c) 322 Skull and Bones Agreement. And the Skull and Bones Agreement is, we will fund you, we will also defend you, we will provide for you, but you can't talk about this and you can't say it like this and you can't teach it like that. And this is why when you go to churches, established churches, they got ATMs inside of them now. All kind of money, decked out galore. You would think that a fucking billionaire owns a place in some of these churches. The ones that are funded by 501(c), yeah. They getting that guap to keep you dumb and stupid, to keep you controlled. And anytime you step into gnosis, anytime you step into true theology, anytime you step into metaphysics, anytime you step into exoteric wisdom, anytime you step into true spirituality, if you express it out loud, what does the church do? What does a church member do? They tell you you're practicing witchcraft. They tell you you're of the devil. They tell you that you're worshiping Satan. They tell you that it's evil. They tell you that God is against God. That's what they tell you. Who you think paid them to think along those lines and to communicate along those lines? Yes, the secret treaty of Verona, which includes surveillance and control of speech, cancel culture, all these things. Yes, these are modern expressions of that. Back in the day, in the 1500s, it was the Vatican who first implemented that espionage and surveillance, because they could not allow the light of the heart of the people to come to revelation and truth, to expose the guise that they have over the people that gave them authority through the symbolism of the church, which establishes them like a strong anchor in the society over the people to move monarchical rulership and policies that keeps the wealth with the same family, same lineage, spreading its order and power, stripping the people of all of their wealth as they believe in a mystery God that's going to come to save them, or pampering and consoling themselves with the version of religion that was given to them by these Ahrimanic personalities and policies that doesn't get to the truth. See, when you get to astrology, you get through all of that. With astrology, you're able to see through all established religions because it's the source of gnosis in and of itself, astrology.
So Trump is actually building a control grid of, like, it's like he's a robot right out of the WEF or China, for that matter. It's the exact opposite of what MAGA thought they were voting for, right? I mean, let me just get your response to what she said. That's happening, right?
100%. And Catherine Austin Fitts of Solari does great work. She's part of the Independent Media Alliance that myself and Whitney and Ryan formed. And Catherine has been ahead of this. In fact, that documentary I mentioned from 2006, Catherine was in it. She's been warning about this coming, and she's been able to see this. And I will just point out, too, what she's describing there is it's important for people to understand that deep relationship that Palantir and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk have. I know that there's this, I'm just trying to crack through the illusion that people think Elon is a hero. I personally think that is another psyop that a lot of people are falling into, and Elon may have just played his role and then now he's stepping away. What people need to understand is that Doge, the actual purpose of Doge, as Catherine was outlining there, is to make government more efficient, but not in the sense of make it more efficient to work better for people, but to make it a more technocratic government. And for those who don't really understand or know the history of technocracy, I'll just briefly just outline.
So you know what? Hang on.
If you don't mind, Jimmy.
I'm going to actually hold off one second on that, and because I'm going to show that short documentary that you put together, which is very. But just to kind of put a button on this Palantir segment of this of today's show. It took just 6 weeks to go from ICE partnering with Palantir to track immigrants to the government partnering with Palantir to track all Americans. That's from the TrumpFile.org. And here's the guy who runs Palantir. We've showed him before. He's a true psychopath. He's the perfect guy that the CIA would pick to do this job. And Reed Cooley tweets out, CIA agent and head of Palantir, Alex Karp, says his company's software single-handedly stopped the far right in Europe. So let's listen to him say this.
Look, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which was just...
So when he says they stopped... So what he's saying is they stopped a populist political movement that was spurred on by open borders policies, that was spurred on by more war and NATO. So what he's saying is this CIA guy, which is what he is, their company couldn't have started or without the money from the CIA. The CIA, there wasn't a company. The CIA gave them billions of dollars and said, go start doing this. And they did it. And so he's bragging that they actually squashed populist political movements. And the way they do the cover for doing that and talking about it publicly is they call it far right. Well, if there's anything more far right than funding literal Nazis, which is what the European Union is doing in Ukraine, that I don't know what it is, because that's what far right is. They're talking about people pushing back against open borders and people pushing back against censorship. That's not far right. That used to be called unions activity in the United States and lefties, but they call it far right, just like they call me far right. So any time the establishment wants to discredit you or dismiss you, they call you far right. And that's what he's doing there. What he's really admitting to is that we, the CIA, use their technology to stop a populist political movement. The same kind of populist political movement MAGA thought Donald Trump was going to be. And it turns out he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it was a Trojan horse. Because now that Donald Trump is inside the beast, he's unleashing pukes like this on you. And he's going to create a social credit system for you. He's going to create a digital ID for you and digital banking. And it's all going to be undone under one thing. And it's all going to be run by guys like this, not people you vote for. Donald Trump doesn't even understand how this works. So let's listen to what else he has to say. So
used to distribute the COVID vaccine and saved millions of lives.
So they were involved in COVID, forcing people to take experimental medical treatments at the behest of the state, which is really the techno-feudal corporate state.
Globally, we built what we call multi-constellation, and what's often called the digital kill chain. And they're category-defining products. So when you deliver these products to the market, just honestly, people say this isn't going to exist, this isn't valuable, but then it changes the market. And then the market is the Palantir market. Now, that doesn't mean everyone in the world is going to buy our product, but it means most of the sensible people in the world are going to buy from the category we defined.
So what he's saying there is that, you've heard this term, the Internet of Bodies, right? And so through the Internet of Bodies, they're going to even know our thoughts. And this is very much like, science fiction. I remember the Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where they could predict that you were going to do a crime and then go arrest you. That's what they're kind of talking about here. And so if you are a dissenter to the establishment or you are an opposition to the establishment, they're going to use this against you. They're even able to do pre-thought crimes. This is all using AI, right? And so here the Patriot Voice tweets out, Palantir is literally the deepest part of the deep state, and Trump is rolling out the red carpet for them to usher in what will certainly be the beast system, a cashless society in which you will be tracked and monitored every second of every day, and your behavior will dictate how you get to live in society. This is absolutely the Great Reset and Build Back Better repackaged MAGA style. The biggest rug pull in history. Would you agree with that, Derek? That this is the biggest rug pull in history?
Absolutely. I mean, it's ironic to me, Jimmy, that just 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, some of the same people that were protesting against Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, calling for many of the same things now that Palantir and Trump's tech buddies are doing, were fighting it then, I think rightfully so, and we're being targeted for doing so. And now many places, I'm sure you and your audience are seeing the same things I'm seeing online. There's a lot of people making excuses. It's no big deal. We've had databases like this.
Yes.
It's, or even the QAnon sort of stories. I've seen people saying, no, Trump's actually working with Palantir because he's going to target the deep state, not the regular people. It's just used to target the deep state. So don't worry about it. It's all very sad. And I see you have my book up there. I mean, if people want to learn more about solutions, I know we're going to play my little mini documentary in a moment, but I do want to encourage people. You can download my book for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. There's a free audiobook and a free PDF. I wrote it the month before COVID started because in my journalism, I focused on facial recognition, social credit scores, and digital technology. And I started thinking, like, how are we going to thrive and survive outside of what they're building? And so I put a lot of time and thought into that, but I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly. But nevertheless, I think people need to understand, no matter who's president, the true ruling class, what I call the predator class, they operate behind and above the political system and political parties. And so no matter which corporate party's in there, they will find a way to advance that agenda. And often they do so by presenting a hero, whether that's Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or RFK or whoever it may be. They will continue. And I'm sure we'll see another one in the next couple of years. Some sort of grassroots hero will rise and promise they're going to fix and save us from Trump. And, it'll just keep going back and forth until people are ready to see what's really going on.
And so so that your book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, how can people opt out? Can you give us a couple of,
Sure.
Ways to do that?
This is why they're scared of things like voodoo, Ifa Yoruba, African spiritual tradition, Santeria, Igbo. This is why they're scared of things like even witchcraft. They're scared of these such things. Why? Because they can't control its interpretation and dissemination. They can't control the enlightenment that comes from learning these things. They can't control that. Even in astrology. I'm shadow banned, as all y'all know. But I'm teaching astrology in a way that's not controlled or limited by this Catholic regime. I teach astrology in a way that gets straight to the fucking soul, and that's what they don't want. It exposes and expels illusions and falsehoods. This astrology right here, the infamous. Understand that. They thought that they could get rid of me. They thought they could kill me. But after hundreds of years, I'm still here. The more is still true and living. The more is well alive, and I am proof and evidence that you can kill the body, but you can't kill the soul, because guess what? I came right back. I came right back, and I'm still teaching. I came right back. At the Vatican, they took all of our books. They made Muslims look bad. They rewrote history to where it seems impossible that it was us where they got it all from. That's okay. But guess what? I never been to college. But I'm a living proof from the power of my intelligence and mind and from the active sourcing of my heart to the source of the universe. I am living proof that the body is not the person. The soul lives eternally. And I came right back to teach everything that's in that Vatican locked away in books. And it's from my heart. I'm channeling it from my heart. No matter what's in those books, I got it in my heart already. It's written on my heart. They can't take that. They can't steal that. They can't stop that. I am here and I am well alive. I am not dead or lost at sea. I am well alive. I am here. I am a Moor. We survived it. We overcame it. And we still here. From the Spanish Inquisition, 1492, that was not the end of us. We were slaughtered and our souls came right back. I'm here. And if I'm here, the rest of us is here. And you, and all of you who are listening. We still here. All of those who these people got rid of and slaughtered, all of the Christian devotees who were sincere in their heart about their following of Christ. Because their following of Christ was not like what you hear today. No, it ain't. What you hear today in the churches, that is the limitations of the 501(c) and what they're allowed to teach. But true Christianity, yeah, try Rudolf Steiner. Yeah, try Rudolf Steiner. True Christianity, you will not be able to tell the difference between Islam and Judaism. It is one and the same expression. You will not be able to tell the difference between true Christianity, the ancient Kemetic wisdom. It's one and the same. It would not be in contradiction. Even astrology. When they're talking about St. Peter, the Basilia of St. Peter, yes, that is Pisces in and of itself. Peter is Pisces. And when he's referred to as the rock, it's the evolution of Peter into the manifestation of Aries. Understand that. Pisces and Aries cusp. That is Peter. You can't erase the truth. No matter how hard they try, they will never stop it. So, who they tell you to hate, who they tell you to dislike, who they tell you is the enemy, you got to be very careful with that. When they tell you that somebody's bad or somebody's good, you got to listen to your heart. Not the news broadcasting, not the fear mongering. They bought into all of this. They engineer it.
I'm an extremist, I'll say that. I try to push very hard into this. I haven't used banks since 2008. I only have a passport. I'm not like a sovereign citizen or something like that. I simply just try to rethink and reevaluate my relationship with technology and different forms. So I opt out of the facial recognition at the airport as it's rolling out while we still can. I opt out of the TSA body scanners. I don't use Google. I don't use Microsoft. I'm on a Linux laptop right now. Things like that. So I try to take steps I can in my own individual life and encourage other people to do the same. I also don't use big banks. I encourage people to use credit unions or to look into any alternative. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Maybe there's private Monero, cryptos like Monero or gift economy or barter, whatever you're into. I think the point is that we should focus our energy on building parallel alternative systems outside of what they're building. Even in that infamous essay and video that people saw back in 2020, the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and be happy. If you go back and read the original article, which came out in 2016 and was published at the Wall Street Journal as well as the World Economic Forum's website, even in that dystopian description of the future where you have no privacy and no property and it's some alleged utopia, even in that description, the World Economic Forum says, sometimes I worry about the people we left behind, the people who now live outside of the cities in 18th and 19th century towns. And they kind of make it seem like we're living in poverty out there. But I believe even that is somewhat of an acknowledgement that there will be people who opt out of these systems and live maybe outside that. I don't mean like we're living in some dystopia. I think it's possible through things like permaculture and using technology in a private way to start to lay the foundation for a path for humanity that doesn't involve being subsumed by this world they're building. But we have to work fast, because very quickly, as digital IDs are rolling out, which is already happening and already advanced by COVID, as facial recognition advances, social credit scores, things like this, it is going to become increasingly difficult to operate. Anybody who's already operating in the mainstream system without a credit score understands how difficult it is currently. But imagine when that's the social credit score you were describing, Jimmy, and you want to opt out of those systems. If there's nowhere to opt into, or there's no alternative, then we're essentially screwed. There's nothing to do. And we end up like China, where activists can have their WeChat, one app to rule them all, turned off if they try to organize anti-COVID protests, or people can have their bank accounts turned off and things like that. We're already seeing the early version of that with Patreon, PayPal, and some of the banking, like you mentioned, the Canadian truckers movement, but it's going to get much worse. And so I focus on how do we opt out and build alternative parallel systems, whether that's health, finance, education, food, all these different areas. One just real quick other example, if you don't like Monsanto, you don't like the big box stores, I'm sure there's a farmer's market somewhere near you. Go meet the people who are growing the food you like. Get to know the farmers. I'm not saying you need to become a farmer, but start to build those relationships so that you're not dependent on the big box stores that tried to force you to wear masks or tried to make you take a PCR test to get in or whatever. I mean, I think it's really just so important at this moment for people to start thinking about these ideas. I tend to call this exit and build. We exit from unsustainable slavery systems, as I call them, that do not align with our values and our principles, and instead focus on building or supporting those who are building new systems that are aligned with our values. And personally, I don't think politics is going to fix it. I don't think violence is the answer. Apathy is definitely not the answer. So I really try to be proactive in my own life and kind of lead by example. You mentioned I'm from Texas originally. I now live in Mexico. I decided to move like 6 years ago. We've got land, we're growing food, and trying to spread these ideas to other people. And I know more and more people who took this idea during COVID and realized, you know what, I'm living in Seattle, for example, and Seattle is a total COVID hellhole. So I'm going to move to a smaller town, or I'm going to move to Texas or Florida. That's kind of the exit and build idea as well. It's about exiting from systems, but it can also mean exiting from a physical location if you realize the place you're living in is not conducive to liberty and privacy and is going to be, a bad place to be in the future. You might decide to move to the town over, the state over, or in my case, the country over. Whatever you do, I think the point is to start thinking about how we, in our own hands, in our own lives, and in our local communities can really get active. And I'll just throw out one other little tip that's in my book. If people want to learn more, if you're in a situation where you don't have anybody in your local area, I want to invite you to go to freedomcells.org, as in the cells in your body, freedom, CELLS.org. It's a simple place where people can use our maps and search and find like-minded groups and people in their area and connect in the real world to start talking about these ideas. So I encourage people to check that one out too.
Come see us on tour in Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, Liverpool, Birmingham, and London. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
If you look at, for example, Palantir, right? Palantir, Palantir Technologies, which the CEO is Alex Karp, CEO Alex Karp. This is a very much advanced surveillance technology company, Jewish owned, and it is a continuation of support to the secret treaty of Verona. The secret treaty of Verona, it keeps world powers on the same page of maintaining monarchical status with rich oligarchs in disguise as congressmen and women to preserve the legacy of names as principalities, and it surveillances the estate of the entire globe in the same way that even since the 1500s, the late 1500s, the Vatican did. It is global policy now. Cancel culture was a test run of modernizing the intensity of this capability globally. Making sure that Christ cannot return. And what I mean by making sure Christ cannot return, making sure that the revolutionary state and conviction of the people does not manifest and accelerate through their enlightenment and revelation connected to the heart and reconnection of themselves as authentic beings, natural, autonomous beings in a natural state, knowing themselves in the image and likeness of God, demanding, not asking for the freedom. Can't have that. Can't have them catching the revelation of love through a rival that began with curiosity and wisdom. They can't have that. They got to stop Christ from being born. They got to stop Moses from being born. And this is the problem with feminism. You allow yourself to be subject to that bitterness and hate that makes a useful idiot out of you because of something that didn't go wrong in a relationship or whatever else. Indoctrination at the college campus. And here you go being a part of that destruction of the only people of the people's only hope. Abortion clinics taking out more babies than a battlefield. And you're only helping them to stop Moses from being born, stop Jesus, stop Christ from returning. That's all you're doing. You helping it. But you on your bad bitch era. You a baddie. Meanwhile, you trying to stop Christ from returning. Meanwhile, you trying to stop Moses from coming back in your ignorance. That's that bullshit. If you want to read in detail about these things I'm mentioning, you could go to my webpage, do a thorough read. I got it all there. I can't do it all for you. You know what I'm saying? Can't do it all for you. But globally, this is what the deal is. All on the same page. One thing they can't have is that Moors realize who they are and take claim. Because that's the only way they were able to get in a stand-up position. When you on the ground, you got to get to your knees, and then from your knees, you got to squat upwards. That squat upwards was on suppressing the identity of those who they enslaved. Because the identity of those who they enslaved were the very ones whose estate they stole and whose titles they stole and rebranded it for themselves. It is also whose knowledge they took and took claim of for themselves as they being the origins of it. Even in the microcosm, you still see that here in the Americas. African Americans invented more than half of the shit that you see in America. Stoplight, cell phone, light, the city of DC. I mean, we could go on and on, but will they ever get credit for it? No. Even a bottle of whiskey, Tennessee whiskey, was created by a nigga, a Moor. But a white man's going to take credit for it. So this ain't nothing new. And the proof continues to be expressed as time goes on, even in modern times. The proof and evidence is there of what happened because they keep doing the same shit over and over again. Look at Donald Trump in the office, looking out for his Jewish buddies, trying to be slick, subjugating illegal immigrants to the 13th Amendment slavery clause rather than sending them back home so that they can come back and come the right way if they want to come in here. But instead of him doing that, he's subjugating them to the 13th Amendment clause and then selling them back to his oligarchical rich buddies who are part of that monarchical regime. This is what they do. But everybody's supposed to forget how this country was built. Everybody's supposed to forget what it took to make America great. It was slavery. In particular of the Moors. The ones whose estate you stole and one whose ideas you continue to steal over and over again. One whose creativity reaches from here all over the globe. All of the children want to be like us. All the children, whether we wrong or we right, all the children want to be like us. We have a fatherly connection to all the children, a big brother connection to all children of all races and all cultures all over the globe, and nobody can refute that. The African American male, he owns the heart of all the children of the world. And the African American female, she is the influencer of all females' attitudes of the world. And that right there is also evidence of who the fuck we are. And it clarifies the burden, the responsibility that Moors have in this nation to do right and be just, because you are misleading people when you don't. It's not just about you. We have a role to play. And we have to answer for that calling. People can lie all they want about who we are. They can hide it, they can disguise it, they can burn books, they can tell all kind of stories, make all kind of policies. But our nature is always going to prove who we really are. And some people want us to be dysfunctional, to be walking the earth acting like niggas. And I despise it. I can't stand it. I resent it. I hate it. I can't stand to see black people walk around acting like niggas. Because if you only knew who you are and how much damage you're doing by behaving that way, how much opportunity you're missing by not knowing yourself and showing up for your assignment. If only we knew. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all those other things. You know what I mean? Remember to schedule for your natal birth chart reading concerning the eclipse season. Very important time right now for the eclipse season. Stay sharp, stay ahead. Also, don't forget the youth, don't forget the children. If you're having a hard time connecting to a loved one, including your children, let's do a synastry reading so we can get the facts, clarify everything, get the understanding. Understanding is the best part. That's what makes the unity. Thank you for your support. It was challenging to compile this, to put this together, just freestyle it, from the heart. I'm hoping I didn't chop it up too bad. But, what I want to introduce to you all is the Secret Treaty of Verona, and to understand that it has a role to play in why events are as they are. Understand?